In the robing room.
The court said, I called you in this morning because during jury selection and the first day of trial, I have observed a troubling pattern of discord between the attorneys in this case. In your interactions with each other, there have been a number of instances of discourteous behavior, including snippiness, bickering, sarcasm, eye-rolling, and heavy sighs. The tenor of the proceedings has been diminished by this negative emotionalism. As officers of the court, I expect that you will observe courtroom decorum and abide by standards of professionalism. If you deal with each other in an unprofessional manner in the presence of the jury, I will stop the proceedings and direct that you only address the court and not each other, which will slow down the trial considerably. You have an ethical obligation to advocate zealously, but that zealousness must never cross the line into disrespect of your adversaries. Such conduct is an affront to the court's dignity and may potentially disrupt and frustrate the trial. I urge you to review the Supreme Court's decision in Pounders v. Watson, 521 U.S. 982, 988, 1997, as well as 18 United States Code, Section 401. In other words, you need to nip it in the bud. Don't test me. I received a letter from the prosecution this morning. They seek to admit certain exhibits that are preserved copies of online posts on G News and Getter. When do you want to use those exhibits?
Mr. Ferguson said, Your Honor, we expect those will be offered tomorrow.
The court said, all righty. So I will need a response from the defense today. When do you think you can get that to me?
Mr. Skirrick said, by 3 o'clock, Your Honor.
The court said, all right then. So I will address that after I receive your response. You're excused.
Ms. Schrofa said, Your Honor, may we raise a matter that I wish to raise prior to the start of the witness testimony?
The court said, go ahead.
Ms. Schrofa said, Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, in the cross-examination last week, the court might recall I had difficulty with the exhibit numbering. When I tried to pull up an exhibit from the defense side for cross-examination purposes, it did not match up to the numbering on the government side. I have reviewed 3,500 materials in this case that is being given to the defense with constantly changing 3,500 numbers. So what used to be 3519 to 57 3 days ago is a different document than what it is today. I raise this as a seasoned lawyer to inform the court that I'm having trouble keeping up with the constant. I've never had a case where the 3,500 numbers change. So that's one matter. And I hope that we can have a set of documents, and I think Ms. Tilton can speak to this more if need be. But we are having trouble reconciling the 3,500 material being produced with new Bates stamp numbers, with new 3,500 numbers. That's one issue. The second issue is, we're getting 3,500 material, and I know this is normal, but for example, I just walked in this morning and there is a 2-page, single-spaced 3,500 production of the witness that's about to take the stand. So respectfully, I know you don't take a break before lunch, but either I need 20 minutes now to review it or I will need 20 minutes after the witness testifies to review it. I did not even have a second copy to go over it with Mr. Guo. I imposed upon your court to either run to the 5th floor to make a copy, but I see that your law clerk helped me out and made an extra copy, but I need at least 20 minutes to just go over that. I'm sorry to raise this now, but it's...
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, over the weekend our paralegal Ms. Loftus sent the defense, in response to questions from the defense, updated exhibits and exhibit list that we audited, which should resolve the issues that Ms. Schroff just mentioned. The 3,500 that Ms. Schroff is mentioning just now is 3,500 material that was generated this morning. So we gave it to the defense as soon as it was completed. But to help Ms. Schroff out, we will call the witness later on, and we'll call Zhou first so Ms. Schroff will have plenty of time to review that 3,500 material in advance of that witness testimony.
The court said, so this is precisely the type of issue that I should not be hearing about. In 24 years I've never had lawyers come to me and tell me that they can't agree on the numbering of exhibits. For goodness sakes, you have got to cooperate on these purely ministerial matters. So you'll have the break to review that document.
Ms. Schrofa said, Yes, Your Honor, but there's nothing we can do about the numbering system. We're happy to cooperate. I believe Ms. Tilton is in constant contact with them. This is really her bailiwick. She has, and I have. I think Ms. Loftus has done the same. But I don't think that this is a lack of cooperation problem. I don't know what the problem is. Honestly, I've never had a case, I agree with you, where 3,500 numbering is changed. I've never had that. A document that's marked number 19 remains 19.
The court said, Ms. Schroff, I've heard enough. You know how to fix this. Fix it. You're excused.
All counsel said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
Recess. In open court, jury not present.
The court said, Good morning. Would you make your appearances, please?
Appearances noted.
The court said, Please be seated. Please have the jurors brought in.
Jury present.
The court said, Please be seated. Good morning, jurors.
The juror said, "Good morning."
The court said, Welcome back. Thank you for arriving on time. This way, you can walk into the courtroom at 9:30, and we can get going and proceed in an efficient manner. Thank you. Would the prosecution call its next witness?
Ms. Murray said, "Thank you, Your Honor." We call Zhou.
The law clerk said, "Please raise your right hand."
Witness sworn.
The court said, Please state your name and spell it.
The witness said, "My name is Lu Zhou, Lehou."
The court said, You may inquire.
Ms. Murray said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
Lehou, called as a witness by the government, having been duly sworn, testified as follows. Direct examination. By Ms. Murray.
Good morning, Mr. Zhou.
Good morning.
In what state do you live?
Florida.
What do you do for work?
I'm a licensed realtor.
Have you ever been a follower of Miles Guo?
Yes.
Do you see anyone in the courtroom today that you recognize from your time following Miles Guo?
Yes.
Who?
I see Miles Guo.
Can you describe him by where he's seated and an item of clothing he's wearing?
Mr. Kamarju said, "Will stipulate to identity, Your Honor."
The court said, He has indicated the defendant. Go ahead.
Ms. Murray said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Do you see anyone else that you recognize from your time following Miles Guo in the courtroom here today?
Yes. A few.
Can you identify them by their names or the names you know them by?
There's a few followers sitting in the court on the audience side, left side. The name? Yes. Rachel Eva. Mile 7, Yongbing Zhang. There's a nickname, Heaven Spare No One. That's all I see.
Thank you. Mr. Zhou, where were you born?
China.
When did you come to the United States?
1998.
Why did you come to the United States?
I came here to study, and for college.
After you moved to the U.S., where did you go to school?
I went to Miami-Dade College.
And what did you study there?
I was a major in music education, and I played piano and the trombone.
Mr. Zhou, are you a supporter of the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP?
No.
What experience, if any, has your family had in the past with the CCP?
Our family suffered tremendously from the Chinese government, both family on my mother and my father's side. My maternal grandparents, they went abroad to study. My grandfather was soil engineer. He worked building roads. And at the time he worked for the Chinese government. After he finished building road, he became a professor at a university. During Cultural Revolution and the Red Guards, some of his students came to their houses, physically and verbally abused my both parents, grandparents. So my maternal grandmother couldn't take the shame of it, so she committed suicide. Before she did that, and she took my great-grandmother's life, because she thought no one would take care of her. And so that my maternal parents the families fall apart. My mother was only 16 at the time. My grandparents' side, we used to own business as regular grocery store. We have a small plaza. The government. During Second Sino-Japanese War, they came to ask, they would take our assets to help the country. They said they're going to borrow it, but it took majority of the assets, left little bit for the family to survive. My father has 9 sisters and brothers, but that is not enough to feed all the family. So 2 of the children was forced to give away. That's my both parents, how they suffered from this government. And there's also one big impact, almost not to have me to live, was one child, one policy in China. It was implemented in 1980. At the time, my mother was already 7 months pregnant. And my parents wanted to have me but the government wanted to do a forced abortion. So my mom went hiding while my dad was reasoning with the government. In the end, he made a deal that by lowering my both fathers' salaries and also to give up the newborn baby's welfare. Which is food, milk, I don't get that, so they would spare my life. So, and also one experience I personally witnessed. When I was 9 years old, that's 1989, the student protests happened in Beijing, also happening in my hometown as well. At the time we lived in an apartment, very close to our hometown, the government square, where the student protests happened. So we were quarantined at the house, not allowed to leave the community. And at a time we heard outside shouting, very loud. So I used to live on the first floor. That day, when we heard outside a lot of protests, shouting, and I went up to the 8th floor to my parents' friend's house. Their balconies are facing directly to the streets. When I walk up to there, at a balcony, I saw. Right near a bus stop, a female student was covered, riot police used a sandbag cover her, just yank her away. And 2 other just jump up and beat her up. Then later, I move my aside to nearby, very close, just look down. There's a mall, 1-story mall. There were some protesters climb up the first floor of the roof. And they were throwing some objects into the crowd. Then we hear loud bangs, then I saw the tip of the concrete wall. With the rooftop, the dust just smashing, shooting the air. We heard people shouting, shots fired. Shots fired. We were all scared. We just quickly got inside our house. So that's the fear we felt for, and we know the regime is cruel.
And how, if at all, did those experiences affect your view of the Chinese government?
The government is untrustworthy. Their cruelty and brutality, it's unimaginable.
Mr. Zhou, you mentioned that you had been a follower of Miles Guo. When did you first learn about Miles Guo?
Back in 2017, earlier, February.
And how did you learn about him?
I watched YouTube, while he's broadcast.
What did you see on YouTube about Miles Guo in 2017?
At the beginning, Miles Guo was doing a broadcast called Safety Announcement. So I was just curious who this person was. Then that's how I first watched the videos.
And before watching that video, had you heard of Miles Guo?
No.
Did you continue to watch his videos after that first time that you saw him in 2017?
Yes.
What, if anything, caught your attention about his broadcast?
Miles Guo introduced himself, then we learned he's a self-made billionaire. But he escaped the Chinese government's persecutions, and he escaped to the United States, looking for protection. And he also started talking about corruption, the Chinese high official corruptions. He has classified information. He will expose their corruptions. And I also learned that he living New York, Manhattan. He bought his luxury hotel in New York called Sherry Netherland Hotel. And also he introduced his family back home. He has a big family, near 100 people in his family. And his wealth, the family owns $20 billion networks and he owns private jets, luxury yachts. Over 100 race car, luxury cars. Also, at the time, he's well dressed in his broadcast, seemed very knowledgeable. Well spoken, and he talk about a lot, his knowledge on cultural. And even sometimes a lot of time impressed me was he mentioned he has bodyguards, 24/7, and he has a legal team. Sometimes he mentioned the information he holds, or he has. He will bear the legal responsible for what he talk about.
The information that you just provided. Was the source of that information Miles Guo himself during those broadcasts?
Yes.
Did there come a time when Miles Guo launched a whistleblower movement?
Yes.
How did you learn about that movement?
Because I started watching his videos, and I know the movement cause he called himself a whistleblower.
What, if anything, was the purpose of Guo's whistleblower movement?
Whistleblower movement was to expose Chinese officials' corruptions.
What actions, if any, did Guo encourage whistleblower followers to take to combat the CCP corruption?
At the time he using social media, we become followers of his social accounts. Of course I learned some of the corruption he mentioned in his broadcasts. He encouraged us to spread words. Beginning, my action was just following everyone else, retweets, or sometimes repost while he talk about it. Just spread into other. I had created a Twitter account to help to spread the words.
What, if anything, did Guo say about how people could join the whistleblower movement and become followers?
Beginning, he has had his Twitter accounts, people can follow him, and also, at the time, there were few very activist followers appear on the social media. There would also reveal their identity, face, and join Miles's broadcasts. At the time there were one follower named Sarah Wei. She created a group called Voice of Guo. Then there was a people can also join there. Also that means join the movement. So I joined that group.
Was Voice of Guo also called VOG at times?
Yes.
How, if at all, did the followers communicate with one another?
At the time we have software we used for everyone to communicate. It's called Discord.
Can you describe for the jury what Discord is?
Discord is a free software, allow a user to create channels, which is like chat rooms. The chat room then also you can create subchannels for any other categorized purposes. The software, you're able to let users to join using link, and you can send messages, share messages, pictures, videos, files. And you can also start voice meetings in the group. So when I joined, it was categorized. And the part 1 remember was, there's subchannels so they create a subchannel as a working group. As a task force, for certain things we want to do.
Did you and the other followers use your real names in those Discord chats?
No.
How, if at all, did you identify yourselves?
I had created my username as Coffee Cantata, then used Chinese 2 words, Wenlu, PH. That was my hashtag.
And did other followers similarly use aliases or handles when they communicated with one another?
Yes, mostly at the time everyone has their own nickname.
By the way, what other names, if any, do you know Miles Guo by?
7 brothers, and also Ho Wan Gui, that's the Cantonese pronunciation.
Mr. Zhou, are you familiar with the rule of law organizations?
Yes.
What are those?
Rule of Law was created by Miles it was a charitable organization.
Around when were those rule of law organizations launched?
In 2018.
And how did you hear about them?
It was publicly announced during press conference.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, at this time I would like to offer a stipulation between the parties. This is Government Exhibit Stip 2.
The court said, so I just want to remind the jurors what a stipulation is. A stipulation is an agreement between both sides to present evidence to the jury, without calling a witness to testify about the subject matter. You may read the stipulation.
Ms. Murray said, Thank you, Your Honor. This is a stipulation regarding web pages and videos. The parties stipulate that in the chart that is contained within this exhibit, which is Government Exhibit Stip 2, columns A, B, and C accurately list the following information. The government exhibits listed in column A are authentic copies of web pages that were preserved from the internet. if a web page contained a video that was also preserved. The associated video is designated with AV in the government exhibit name. For example, GXC20 is a preservation of a web page, and GXC20V is a preservation of the video that was on that web page. Column B in the stipulation lists the web address or URL of the web page that was preserved. And column C lists the date on which the web page was preserved. And at this time, Your Honor, there is a chart contained within this exhibit which is now admitted. I would like to just note two of the exhibits noted within this chart. One is GXC26 and corresponding GXC26V. Those are YouTube videos that were preserved, and they are dated July 15, 2020. And then GXC63 and GXC63V, again. YouTube video from a web page, and that's dated November 25, 2020.
The court said, and you're moving to admit that?
Ms. Murray said, moving to admit those two exhibits from within this chart and moving to admit the stipulation at this time.
The court said, they're all admitted.
Ms. Murray said, thank you.
Government's Exhibit Stip 2, C26, C26V, C63, C63V received in evidence. By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, directing your attention to November of 2018. Did there come a time when you watched a live stream of an announcement relating to the rule of law?
Yes.
Do you recall on what website you watched that announcement?
It was on a live stream.
The website is named Livestream?
That was a link. It's a live stream will push out the channel, the broadcast. But the channel was under Rule of Law Foundation. The live stream, I believe the website associated was Vimeo.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, we would move to admit one more exhibit from GX Stip 2. That's GXW 1005 and GXW 1005V. And that's YouTube, and it was preserved on February 9, 2024.
The court said, they're admitted.
Government's Exhibits W1005, W1005V received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, thank you. Ms. Loftus, could we now publish what's admitted in evidence GXW 1005V?
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, do you recognize this video?
Yes.
Have you viewed it before?
I watched it earlier in live.
And there's an insignia on the top left here.
Mr. Kamaraju said, Your Honor, I apologize. Could we have a brief sidebar on this?
The court said, all right.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor, the defense just wanted to be clear that the stipulation was just to the online preservation. We hadn't stipped to moving it into evidence. So we have an objection to hearsay. They're going to play a video of Mr. Bannon speaking at this press conference.
The court said, so I don't understand what you're saying was not admitted through the stipulation.
Mr. Skirik said, the stipulation, Your Honor, was just to authenticity. It was to the video having been pulled down from the source. The stip did not go to the admissibility.
The court said, go ahead.
Mr. Ferguson said, that's correct, Your Honor. It's just authenticity in the stip. I understand the objection is to hearsay. We're not offering this video clip for the truth of what Mr. Bannon is saying in it. We're offering it for the falsity of what he's saying. And it's a clip from the joint announcement of the Rule of Law Fund, where both Mr. Guo and then Mr. Bannon speak. And this is a clip from Mr. Bannon's speech.
The court said, so are you seeking to admit it because it's an admission?
Mr. Ferguson said, no, because it's not offered for its truth. We're offering it for the fact that it was said.
Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor.
The court said, for the effect on the listener?
Mr. Ferguson said, correct, Your Honor. These are launch videos that victims watched and believed.
Mr. Skirik said, and Your Honor. What Mr. Bannon is going to say in that video that the government is going to show the witness and the jury is a statement by Mr. Bannon that Mr. Guo was going to start the Rule of Law Foundation with $100 million. They contend that that was a representation that it was his own money. So it is in fact offered for the truth of that statement, that that's in fact what Mr. Bannon said and that was, in effect, a misrepresentation. So I'm not sure that there are non-hearsay issues here. Anne.
The court said, "Are you suggesting a curative instruction?"
Mr. Skirek said, "I think we do need a limiting instruction, Your Honor. But I think there is a risk of 403 with the jury here as well."
The court said, "I would expect that numbers of these types of statements, video or otherwise, are going to be propounded by the prosecution. Am I correct?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "Yes, Your Honor."
The court said, "So I'm looking for an application for a limiting instruction."
Mr. Skirek said, "We would ask, Your Honor, that the jury be given a limiting instruction that this is not a statement, that Mr. Bannon's statement is not a statement attributable to Mr. Guo."
Mr. Ferguson said, "We would object to that. That's not necessary for the admission of the statement. We would be fine with a limiting instruction that said these statements are not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. That's the definition."
Mr. Kamraju said, "Your Honor, since this is just an authenticity stip, I think the prosecution has to lay the foundation in order to introduce this through the witness. I know this one has already come in, but I think as these videos are coming in, I think the proper format is to do that first."
The court said, "Absolutely."
Mr. Kamraju said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
The court said, "Okay."
Continued on next page. In open court. By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, there's a logo on the top left of this screenshot. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does that read?
Guo Media.
What is Guo Media, or what was Guo Media at the time?
It was earliest symbol that was created for this movement. There was a media channel. That's the name for it.
And what type of content, if any, was posted on Guo Media at this time?
At this time, this was that press conference happening in New York.
Ms. Murray said, "Ms. Loftus, if we could please play this video. This is Government Exhibit W1005, V1.
The court said, "Is it now that you're looking for me to give the limiting instruction?"
Mr. Kamraju said, "Yes, Your Honor."
The court said, "Members of the jury, this video is not being offered by the government for the truth of what is stated in the video. Keep that in mind as you watch it."
Ms. Murray said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
Video played. By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, do you recognize the individual depicted in this video?
Yes, I do.
Who is it?
Steve Bannon.
What role, if any, did Steve Bannon have with the rule of law?
He was the co-founder of the Rule of Law Foundation.
What, if anything, did you learn from the Rule of Law livestream that you saw in 2018 about whether Miles Guo was donating money to the Rule of Law?
The video I learned from was the conference that talk about this announcement and also talk about this fund will use to help Chinese dissidents and to have them to financially help. And also help them with legal support, and to also use the fund to investigate mysterious business deaths.
The court said, "I'm sorry. Investigate mysterious what?"
The witness said, "Business. Person's deaths."
The court said, "Death. All right. Go ahead."
Did you have an understanding of whether the Rule of Law Fund would be funded with a certain amount of money at its inception?
Yes. There was $100 million.
Now you said from your viewing of Miles Guo's broadcast that at that time you had the impression that Miles Guo was wealthy. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the time that you viewed this launch video in 2018, did you believe that Miles Guo could donate $100 million to the Rule of Law charity?
Yes. You.
Ms. Murray said, "We can take that down, Ms. Loftus." Thank. Did there come a time when you donated to the Rule of Law?
Yes, I did.
Ms. Murray said, "Your Honor, may I approach the witness?"
The court said, "You may."
Ms. Murray said, "Thank you. I've handed the witness a binder that contains exhibits that are marked for identification as GXC 26, GXC 63, V1 and V4. GXCT 209 and 211, GX 6150-160 and their corresponding translations, GX 6180 through 190 and their corresponding translations, GXV02, 13. 15 to 16, 18 to 19, 22 to 23, 25 to 29, 31, 59, 67 to 69, 77 to 78, 81 to 82, and 84, as well as GXW 1005, GXW 56-57 and GXW 59.
By Ms. Murray.
And Mr. Zhou. I'd ask if you would briefly flip through that binder and let me know if you recognize the exhibits that are in that binder.
Yes.
Are some of those documents that you provided to the government in connection with your time when you were a follower of Miles Guo?
Correct, yes.
Have you reviewed all of the exhibits that are contained within that binder?
Sorry. At this moment?
Previously, before today.
Before, yes, all.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, at this time the government would move to admit government exhibits GXV2, 13, 15 to 16, 18 to 19, 22 to 23, 25 to 29, 31, 59, 67 to 69, 77 to 78, 81 to 82, and 84.
The court said, They are admitted.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no objection.
Ms. Murray said, Thank you.
Government's exhibits V2, 13, 15 to 16, 18 to 19, 22 to 23, 25 to 29, 31, 59, 67 to 69, 77 to 78, 81 to 82, and 84 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can you please publish what's now in evidence as Government Exhibit VO27? If we could zoom in on the top portion.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, what is this?
That's my receipt, donation receipt.
And what date is this document?
May 18, 2019.
What donation does this reflect?
This is donation to Rule of Law Foundations in $500, my first donation.
Why did you donate to the Rule of Law in 2019?
Yes, because I'm part of the follower, I want to help any of the dissidents, as many as I can. Not just follow Miles Guo to help them, so that's the same goal I wanted to help.
If Miles Guo had not donated $100 million to the Rule of Law, if you had known that at the time, would that have been important to you?
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection to form.
The court said, Overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
Why would it have been important to you at that time if you had known that Miles Guo had not donated $100 million to the Rule of Law?
Because there's a lot of people that need help, Chinese people, there's a lot of dissidents. Me alone. 500, I can do as much as I can, but $100 million, that can help a lot of people.
Ms. Murray said, We can take that down, Ms. Loftus. Thank you. Mr. Zhou, did there come a time when you volunteered for Miles Guo and his whistleblower movement?
Yes, I did.
Around when did you begin to volunteer?
In 2017, couple months I start following, just retweeting when Miles Guo started. And later I also volunteered to transcribe Miles Guo's videos. I also did translation and video editing. And I also helped the streaming services for the movement.
Who, if anyone, assigned that volunteer work to you?
From beginning, from the VOG, there were some volunteer groups, they give me the transcript work to do. Then later, the work assigned from farm management teams.
The court said, What do you mean by transcript work?
The witness said, Yes, Your Honor. Transcript means most of Miles Guo's video it's in Chinese speaking. Now there's not a subtitle, so we would have to create the subtitles. That's transcript. I would listen the video, take down what Miles Guo said in Chinese, then type it into a Chinese, become a subtitle.
And when you say farm, you mentioned that some of the work was assigned to you by farm leaders. Can you explain to the jury what you mean by farm?
Farm is an adjective. It's quotation for work, but the real meaning is refer to offices. And Miles Guo mentioned, when the whistleblower established, he wanted to have 50 farms in different regions throughout the world, become the subdivisions, offices.
In what way, if any, were the farms kind of organized under one unit?
The farm organized, there are person we call farm leader. Most of the people were very active as a follower, follow the movement, follow movement. Those people are most of them are designated by Miles Guo to become the farm leaders. So there were farm. Once it's created, in different countries, regions, then also gather people locally or online to have their own groups. But all under one of the headquarter, which is farm called Himalaya Global Alliance to managing those farms.
Who, if anyone, was in charge of the Himalaya Global Alliance?
At the time Global Alliance was only a few people and Miles Guo was one. There are few peoples. Then they call themselves Iron Blood, a group.
Why, if at all, did the leaders of the Himalaya Global Alliance, Miles Guo and the others, call themselves the Iron Blood Group?
There were individuals selected by Miles to give titles. Because Himalaya Global Alliance formed with a designated chairman, Secretary General. And there's a few people that Miles Guo designated those people. Miles Guo said, those are brothers because those brothers are willing to sacrifice for him and shed the blood with him and for this movement. So that name was formed from that.
Returning to your volunteer work that you did for the movement, were you paid for that work?
No.
You mentioned that you were involved in, among other things, streaming. On what website or websites did you stream content?
On streaming, I did YouTube, and also on Getrin GTV.
What is Getter?
Getter is the social platform created by Miles Guo. It's similar to Twitter. It's just like Twitter features. You share your posts and people can follow, retweet.
What is GTV?
GTV, it's a website that's similar act as YouTube, allow you to post in the live streams, post videos.
And who, if anyone, was in charge of GTV?
In charge of GTV, I don't know.
Whose company, if anyone's, was GTV?
Oh, GTV was owned by Guo Media.
And who owned, in turn, Guo Media?
That, I don't know who owned the company.
Focusing on GTV for a moment, what, if anything, at that time, in 2018, 2019, did Miles Guo say about GTV?
Miles, GTV here introduced, and he called out for investment that asked people who like to invest into GTV.
Around when did Miles Guo offer an investment opportunity into GTV?
Earlier 2020.
Directing your attention to March of 2020. Did you participate in a Guo broadcast regarding that GTV investment opportunity?
Yes, I did.
What, if anything, did Guo ask his followers about their interest in investing in GTV during that broadcast?
I remember I watched the video live when it was broadcast. Miles Guo was calling people who like to invest in GTV. He mentioned if you like to invest in $10,000. Raise your hand in the chat group by posting of the emoji icon as your intent. He also asked, let me see who wanted to invest $100,000 using 2 of the emoji as your intent.
And during that broadcast, what level of interest, if any, was there from the followers in investing in GTV?
I sent 1 emoji as for intent for $10,000.
From your viewing of that live broadcast, did other followers similarly indicate their interest in investing in GTV?
Yes. There were a lot of 1 emoji for $10,000 and also few $100,000 investment that people putting 2 emojis.
By Ms. Murray.
Now, directing your attention to April 21st of 2020. Did you watch a pre-recorded broadcast that Guo streamed about the GTV investment opportunity?
Mr. Kumraju said, objection to form, Your Honor. She's testifying.
The court said, you can restate the question.
Directing your attention to April 21st of 2020. Did you watch any broadcasts on that day that were relevant to GTV?
Yes.
Did those include a broadcast of Miles Guo?
Yes.
What, if anything, was the subject of what Miles Guo was discussing during that broadcast?
Yes. I remember I got a share link for that. Miles Guo mentioned the GTV. First he mentioned any investment has risk. Then for any investor you will make your own judgment. Then he talk about the GTV. We know that's the mention based on his part to talk about GTV investment. He mentioned about the GTV how become today. There's a breakthrough because GTV has been targeted. He mentioned target by CCP, hacking, a lot of hackers trying to take down. The GTV was pulled us off, it's not easy. But he mentioned the GTV future forecasts, this is a platform that's intended for Chinese dissidents have a voice. Freedom of speech. We're the only one, no other platform. And he mentioned this, as we all see, GTV future growths. From the current 6 people online at the same time. But eventually will grow to thousands people doing the broadcast together, the skill of it. And so I remember that video also post contact information, his personal contact information for the investment. If anyone want to invest, can direct contact.
When you say his personal contact information, to whom are you referring?
Miles Guo.
So in that video, Miles Guo provided his information for people to contact regarding an investment?
Yes.
What, if anything, did Miles Guo say in that video about what you would get in exchange for investing in GTV?
We'll get stocks, GTV stocks.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, at this time I would like to offer a stipulation between the parties. This is Government Exhibit STIP 9. The stipulation reads that the parties stipulate and agree that in the below chart which is contained in this exhibit, the exhibits listed under column A contain audio or text in a foreign language. And in the chart that's contained within this stipulation, the exhibits listed under column B are true and accurate translations of the audio or text contained in the exhibits listed under column A. The stipulation further stipulates and agrees that the stipulation, as well as the government exhibits listed under column B, those are the translation and transcript stipulations, may be received into evidence as government exhibits at trial.
The court said, the stipulation is admitted.
Government's Exhibit STIP-9 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, and with respect to the particular items contained within the chart. At this time the government would move to admit GXC26V and its corresponding GXC26T, which is the translation and transcription, as well as GXC63V and its corresponding GXC63T, which is the transcription and translation.
The court said, no objection?
Mr. Kamaraju said, no. I would just ask the government to go ahead and just admit all the exhibits that are in the stip for efficiency.
Ms. Murray said, sure. We would then move to admit all of the exhibits contained within the chart that's in Government Exhibit STIP 9.
The court said, they are admitted.
Ms. Murray said, thank you. Ms. Loftus, can you please pull up Government Exhibit GXC26? Just a moment, Your Honor.
Counsel conferred.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, I would like to withdraw the request to admit all of the items contained within this stipulation. The parties' agreement was to admit certain of the translations, but not the full videos listed in column A. So I would like to withdraw the request to admit everything that's noted within the chart. At this time I would just move to admit the 2 particular exhibits that I had mentioned.
The court said, all right then. So those items that were admitted are not admitted. And what you're requesting to admit now is admitted.
Ms. Murray said, thank you, Your Honor. So just for clarity for the record, what I'm seeking to admit is Government Exhibit STIP 9, which is the stipulation, Government Exhibit C26V and C26T, and Government Exhibit C63V and C63T.
The court said, they are admitted.
Ms. Murray said, thank you.
Government's Exhibits C, 26 v. c. 26 t. c. 63 v. c. 63 t received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, all right. Ms. Loftus, if we could please put up Government Exhibit C-26.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, looking at this, do you recognize this video?
Yes.
And up in the top left there is a logo and insignia. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
GTV logos.
Did you watch this video when it was posted online in April 2020?
No, it wasn't posted online when I watch it, so I share a link.
And who, if anyone, shared the link with you to the video?
One of the farm members.
When you say the link was shared, how was it shared with you?
I shared it on the Telegram, our Working the Farm working channels.
So that's over phone application, is that correct?
Yes.
The court said, what do you mean by Telegram?
The witness said, yes, Your Honor. Telegram is another social media software. It's more like you can allow you instant message. You can do it as individual one-on-one, or you can also have a group chat. And there also you can share your files, pictures, links, videos, etc.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can you please play this video from the beginning up until 41 seconds?
Video played.
Ms. Murray said, thank you. We can take that down.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, what, if anything, did Guo say during that video that was broadcast about the amount of stock that one would receive in exchange for their GTV investment?
I remember was the GTV stock in total was about to issue 20 million to 200 million stocks.
And what, if anything, did he say about how much stock somebody would get for the money that they invested personally?
$1 per share.
Did there come a time when you invested in GTV?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Sure. Did there come a time when you invested in GTV?
Yes, I did.
When was that?
I invested end of the May 2020.
And how much did you invest?
I sent 2 payments total for $31,300.
Where did you send your money for that GTV investment?
I send it through VOG, Voice of Guo, the channel which controlled by Sarah Wei.
Why did you send your GTV investment to VOG or Voice of Guo?
Because my investment is less than $100,000, and also Sarah was designated person also can take the GTV placement. Private placement.
Can you explain for the jury how, if at all, it was relevant that your investment was below $100,000?
Could you please be more specific?
Sure. So I believe that you said because your investment was below $100,000, you sent it to VOG. Is that correct?
Yes.
Who, if anyone, directed you to send your investment which was below $100,000 to VOG?
Because the first GTV Miles Guo mentioned about the GTV placement, they were giving out only 2,000 seats. There is a head count, it's limitation on there. The limitation then the people can minimum you can invest $100,000 up to all the way to $1 million. But it's limited seats. And if a lot of people, especially not qualified for the seats are less $100,000. But we can have this other company to invest on our behalf to acquire the GTV stocks. So that was I understand myself my investment is not qualified with the seats. And it's not exceeds over $100,000, so I just went through the VOG, asked for the investment.
So at that time was it your understanding that VOG invested on your behalf and on behalf of others in GTV?
No, they are.
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection, Your Honor, to form.
The court said, sustained. Don't lead.
Did you have an understanding at the time in whose name your money was being invested?
GTV Media.
And for purposes of the shares, whose names, if anyone's, would be on the shares that you spent your money to invest in?
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection to form.
The court said, if you'd rephrase please.
Ms. Murray said, sure. Mr. Zhou, you mentioned that you invested your money through VOG. Is that correct?
Yes.
What arrangement or legal agreement, if any, did you enter into with VOG?
Mr. Kumraju said, objection to form.
The court said, did you enter into a legal agreement?
Ms. Murray said, thank you. Did you enter into a legal agreement with VOG?
Yes.
Can you describe that legal agreement to the jury, please?
It was agent agreement. Sarah Wei would act as my agent to take my investment for the GTV investment.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can we please publish Government Exhibit VO81? Mr. Zhou, what is this?
This is wire instruction I received.
And who, if anyone, sent this to you?
Sent by Sarah Wei, the Voice of Guo channel leader.
I think you mentioned previously that Sarah Wei had some role within the Himalaya Global Alliance. Can you just describe that for the jury?
Yes. She was very active follower before. She revealed herself and joined the movement as well. Then she had some meeting with Miles Guo, even publicly, live broadcast together. So at the time she was with another person that she was very active and designated. And because she also gathered some followers and fall through the whistleblower movement. She formed a group. She was the whistleblower movement. So at the time Miles Guo was also designate her as the followers. The group leaders. And she can also have authorization from Miles Guo to collect GTV investment for us.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can we please publish Government Exhibit VO82? Zoom in on the top. Mr. Zhou, what is this?
That's my wire confirmations.
And looking at this, what was the date of this wire transfer?
May 28, 2020.
And it was a wire sent to where?
It was sent to Voice of Guo Media.
And what was the amount of this particular wire?
$20,000.
Ms. Murray said, we can take that down. Thank you. Why did you want to invest in GTV at that time in May of 2020?
Because first I want to get a GTV stock. And the GTV, I was also the user. And this is a platform. GTV website also is for the freedom of voice for other Chinese people dissidents. And I was follower myself. I really a believer for this movement. I want to just be part of it and also to help grow this GTV. The GTV was just like any other tech company started. There's also about Miles Guo mention we also will grow this to become the world #1 social media platform. Surpass YouTube. We have all the features, we'll combine Zoom, combine YouTube. We'll have the best top technology implemented into this GTV. So for that I want to be part of it. So I invested.
When Miles Guo said at the time in 2020 that GTV would surpass YouTube, did you believe him then?
Yes. Eventually.
Did you, in fact, receive stock or any shares in exchange for your GTV investment?
No.
At that time in 2020, what, if anything, did Miles Guo say about whether there was a risk of losing your principal investment in GTV?
He made a personal guarantee that for other people invested in GTV would not lose their money. He made personal guarantee on that.
Can you explain what you mean by personal guarantee?
During his broadcast, he mentioned all the money we invested, that principal would never lose. Lost even a cent. He will personally pay back.
And at that time, in 2020, did you believe that Miles Guo was capable of paying or guaranteeing your investment?
Yes.
At that time, 2020, did you have an understanding from Guo's broadcasts about the value of GTV stock?
Yes.
What was your understanding?
There is another broadcast lively on Miles Guo broadcast that I watched live on that day. Where successfully close out the placement, GTV private placement was announcement. Miles Guo mentioned have received GTV alone received $335 million, from VOG received $117 million. And combined, that's near $500 million investment. And the valuation at the time of GTV. He gave up the statement about the value was $2 billion. Then he added from his legal team and from his financial experts the valuation should be $10 billion. So just that moment he explained the investment we did, from 7-point time jumped to estimate made about 30 times.
And at the time that you watched that broadcast in 2020, did you believe Miles Guo regarding the valuation of GTV?
Yes, I did.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can we please pull up Government Exhibit C-63V, which is in evidence? If we could just publish it to the jury, please. Mr. Zhou, do you recognize this video?
Yes.
Is this a broadcast that you watched at the time that it was posted on the internet in 2020?
Yes.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, if we could go to the 12-minute and 40-second mark, please, and start playing.
Video played.
Ms. Murray said, we can pause for a moment please. Your Honor, we've also admitted Government Exhibit C-63T, which is the translation and transcript of this video. I'm going to play this portion and then I'm going to ask Mr. Zhou to read portions of that transcript. Thank you. Ms. Loftus. We can continue.
Video played.
Ms. Murray said, you can stop there. Thank you. Ms. Loftus. If you could please now publish for the jury what's in evidence as Government Exhibit C-63T. And if we could go down to the time stamp of 12:40, please. And zoom in on the right. Mr. Zhou, this is a translation and transcription of the video clip that we just watched. If you could just read in the right column there the English for the jury.
Sure. We had an initial valuation of $200 million for GTV. And the private placement required a minimum investment of $20 million. The private placement exceeded the highest expectations and raised $350 million. This is up to now, this figure. Is about $360 million, let's say $350 million. $350 million does not include the $117 million from VOG. If $117 million plus $350 million, it's more than $480 million, which is almost $500 million. But the figure we have now is the $350 million received, which is just for the contracts with GTV. This turned out to be a conservative estimate and 17.5 times the valuation. Given the tremendous demand for GTV shares and the good capital position of GTV going forward, my lawyers and financial experts mutually agree that a $2 billion valuation is probably too low, and that the actual value of the company is probably closer to $10 billion given the tremendous demand for GTV shares.
Ms. Murray said, thank you. We can take that down. Mr. Zhou, at the time that you watched this broadcast in 2020, did you believe Miles Guo that the value of GTV was approximately $10 billion?
Yes.
At the time that you invested in GTV in 2020, what, if anything, did you understand that your investment would be used for?
Yes. The money first will use to enhance the GTV's features, purchasing top-tiers companies and to expand GTV to take over the YouTube. Become world #1 social media.
At that time in May of 2020, if you'd believed that Guo would use GTV investment money for his own personal expenses, would you have invested in GTV?
Mr. Kumraju said, objection to form, Your Honor.
The court said, if you'll step up please.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, I'll hear your objection.
Mr. Kumraju said, Your Honor, Ms. Murray continues to just embed facts that are not in evidence, asking questions. Then asking the jury to infer, asking the witness to agree with them. That's, in essence, putting her own testimony in front of the jury. If she wants to elicit those questions, She can ask open-ended questions. That was our objection to the form.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor. I believe that the court ruled that hypotheticals could come in questioning of witnesses and, in particular, victim witnesses. And that is what I'm posing to this witness.
The court said, I don't see how she gets at it without asking hypothetical questions.
Mr. Kamaraju said, she could still lay the foundation prior to asking a hypothetical.
The court said, so I think that he's asking you to state whether it's his understanding, the witness's understanding, that, or whether he knows whether Mr. Guo invested the money that he claimed that he had invested.
Mr. Ferguson said, Your Honor, you had ruled in pre-trial rulings that to prove materiality, we can ask the hypothetical question such as, if you had known X, would you have invested? And that's, standard in fraud cases like this.
The court said, of course. I don't think that it's improper though for her to ask whether.
Mr. Ferguson said, to establish she doesn't, in fact, know how it was used. I'm sorry.
The court said, the fact that she's assuming is that Mr. Guo did not invest the $100 million. And so do you know whether the witness knows whether Mr. Guo invested the $100 million?
Ms. Murray said, so this is with respect in particular to the witness's GTV investment and other GTV investment money. I don't believe the witness has any personal knowledge of how that money was used, except to say that. Sitting here today, the witness has an understanding that it was not all used for GTV's business and instead was used for personal expenses.
Mr. Kamaraju said, understanding based on the government's allegations, Your Honor, not on any evidence.
Ms. Murray said, and just to be clear, that's why I asked the question in the manner that I did.
The court said, I don't know that it is detrimental for her to ask it this way as opposed to asking whether he knows if the money was used by Mr. Guo to invest.
Mr. Kamaraju said, to me, Your Honor, the problem is Your Honor definitely ruled that they can ask a hypothetical. So the question is what, if any, foundation they have to lay prior to asking a hypothetical.
The court said, exactly.
Mr. Kamaraju said, so to me, maybe it's just a form point on this particular hypothetical. I suspect they are going to ask many more, so that's why I think it's appropriate to raise it now. To me, she can just establish the basic foundation for it, and then she can ask her hypothetical if she wants.
The court said, okay.
Ms. Murray said, I will do that. I did ask if he had an understanding of how the money was used. But I can ask that question again if that would be sufficient foundation.
Mr. Kamaraju said, that's the distinction.
Ms. Shrofa said, the question is whether he had knowledge, not what his understanding is. Because his understanding could come from your prep of him during his preparation for his testimony here. The question is what knowledge he had at that time, not the knowledge he has now.
Mr. Finkel said, at the time his understanding would address all these concerns and be consistent with the court's ruling.
Ms. Shrofa said, not understanding knowledge.
The court said, you can ask about knowledge and then ask your hypothetical.
Ms. Murray said, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Kamaraju said, thank you, Your Honor.
In open court.
The court said, you may continue.
Ms. Murray said, thank you, Your Honor.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, in May of 2020, when you invested in GTV, did you have any knowledge of how your investment was going to be used?
Yes.
And what did you believe your investment would be used for, again, in May of 2020?
Yes, at the time I believe my investment will use to enhance the GTV. To bring this GTV platform to #1 leading social media platform.
At that time, in May of 2020. If you had believed that Miles Guo would use your GTV investment money for his personal expenses, would you have invested in GTV?
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection, Your Honor. We just addressed this at sidebar.
The court said, if you'll step up again.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, are you asking for, stating that she needs to ask whether Mr. Guo used the money? I mean, what is the question that you're looking for?
Mr. Kamaraju said, no. I thought, my understanding when we left the sidebar was that she was going to ask questions. Do you know how the money was used? She has not asked it.
Ms. Murray said, I believe I did ask that.
Mr. Kumraju said, no, the question that I heard, if I got it wrong, I apologize, was how did he believe he thought the money was going to be used? She never asked the follow-up question of do you know how the money was used in May of 2020?
The court said, so you're going to ask the do you know question.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, what's relevant is his understanding and his knowledge. That goes to the reason that he invested. That's the materiality point. I don't think that it's necessary to establish whether he, as an investor, knew what was happening with the money that was being invested into this company in order for him to say what his motivation was for investing.
Mr. Kumraju said, if you don't ask, if you don't establish that he doesn't know, then how do you ask a hypothetical that says, if you had known, then how would that change your opinion?
The court said, okay.
Mr. Kumraju said, thank you, Your Honor.
In open court.
The court said, you may continue.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, in May of 2020, after you invested $31,300 in GTV. At that time, did you have personal knowledge of how your investment was used?
The money invested to GTV, my understanding was intended to enhance the GTV. Purchase top-tier company or software to make it enhancement and to become the world #1 platform. Surpass YouTube.
And what is that understanding that you had in May 2020? What is that understanding based on?
Miles Guo mentioned his broadcast.
Aside from what Miles Guo mentioned, do you have personal knowledge? Do you know how your money was used, or did you know in May 2020 how your money was used?
That I don't know.
If you had believed that Guo would use your GTV investment money for his own personal expenses in May of 2020, would you have invested in GTV at that time?
No.
Have you heard the phrase, G-series?
Yes.
What is G-series?
G-series is investments including GTV, G-News, G-Fashion, G-Mall, G-Clubs, etc., which were all created by Miles Guo. And this is one of a financial system for the whistleblower movement as their ecosystem.
Do you have an understanding of what, if anything, the G in G-series stands for?
Yes.
What's your understanding?
G is the English letter reference Miles Guo's last name initial, first initial.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus. Can we please pull up for the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 6-151? Mr. Zhou, do you recognize this?
Yes.
At a high level, what is it?
Miles Guo's broadcast.
Do you see the date on the top left?
Yes.
Did you watch this particular broadcast at the time that it was posted on the internet on or about that date?
Yes.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, the government would move to admit Government Exhibit 6-151.
Mr. Kumraju said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit 6-151 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, if we could play that, please, Ms. Loftus. We can publish it to the jury first and then we'll play it.
Video played.
Ms. Murray said, we can stop there, please. We can take it down. Mr. Zhou, there was a reference in the first video clip to Sarah's VOG. What does that refer to?
Sarah Wei.
And VOG, what does that reference?
Voice of Guo.
There was also a reference to a Guo Wengui. Did you see and hear that?
Yes.
Who is that?
Miles Guo.
Generally speaking, what, if anything, did Miles Guo say during those broadcasts we just viewed?
Personally guarantee that investors' money will not lose, only gain. If any 10 cents loss, he'll personally pay.
And did you view those videos at the time that they were posted in 2021?
Yes.
And at that time, when you viewed those videos, did you believe Miles Guo that he would personally guarantee any investments in the G-series?
Yes.
I want to turn your attention now to June of 2020. Did there come a time when Miles Guo announced the launch of a new organization?
Yes.
What was the name of that organization?
It's called New Federal State of China.
Was that also referred to as the NFSC?
Yes.
What was the New Federal State of China?
It's a supervisory organization for the whistleblower movement.
Can you describe how Miles Guo announced the launch of the NFSC?
Yes. That was June 4, 2020. He announced this establishment of NFSC on his private yacht and was lively broadcasted.
Did you watch that broadcast when it was broadcast on June 4, 2020?
Yes, I watched.
How, if at all, is the NFSC, or at the time was the NFSC associated with the G-series?
G-series were already launched before, then it was for the other whistleblower movement. And NFSC was established because NFSC is a supervisory organization on top of all the movement. That's the name that will be used in the future too as a legitimate government. So that's ultimately a name that for this movement.
What do you mean when you say that the NFSC is going to be a government?
Because the movement will take down the China Communist Party. Once Chinese CCP falls, then this organization will try to replace the CCP, give the people one person, one vote.
And how was it your understanding that the NFSC, let me put it in timing, in June of 2020? How was it your understanding that the NFSC was going to take over for the Chinese Communist Party?
At that time my understanding was just to expose the Chinese corruptions. Miles Guo has 3 tactics. He mentioned that by eliminate CCP using by law, by eliminate CCP, using America power, American powers. By eliminate CCP by using CCP itself, that's he mentioned it.
So at that time, in June 2020, was your understanding that the NFSC was going to be a government? Was that based on statements by Miles Guo?
Correct.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can we please publish what's in evidence as Government Exhibit CT-209? Mr. Zhou, looking at the item. Ms. Murray said, if we could zoom in, Ms. Loftus, in the middle of this. The figure that's depicted in those 2 posters or pictures, do you recognize that shape?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
That's the star from the NFSC flag.
How many points does that star have?
Total, 49 stars.
Can you explain for the jury how you get 49 points from that star?
It's a 7 times 7 equal 49.
And what is the significance, if any, of 7 points on that star?
7, we all call Miles Guo 7 brothers. There's a lot of 7 he's associated with. So he was part of the flag creations, participated. And so I believe that's a flag that represents 7 as Miles, the 7s.
Ms. Murray said, we can take that down, Ms. Loftus. Mr. Zhou, did there come a time after the GTV private placement closed in June 2020? When Miles Guo announced a farm-related investment opportunity?
Yes.
What was that opportunity?
That's called a farm loan.
Can you describe for the jury what the nature of the farm loan investment opportunity was?
Farm loan was to have investors lend money to the call it farms, which is the NFSC offices in different divisions throughout the world. Then there was a term lend the money to the farm to use to operate for hirings, expand, and recruit.
And based on the farm loan opportunity, what, if anything, would a lender get in exchange for the loan?
There is a term for 3-year term. And there is also interest rate for annual interest rate placed on that.
And at the end of that 3-year term, what options, if any? Did lenders have to either get their principal and their interest rate or something else?
You have choice to get your money, interest plus your principal, plus interest back. And also you can get stocks.
What type stocks?
GTV stocks.
How was it your understanding at that time, in June 2020, that the farm loan investment opportunity offered either return on your money or stock?
I'm sorry, Could you just repeat it one more time?
Yeah. In June of 2020 or thereabouts, how was it your understanding that, by giving a loan to the farm, 3 years later you could either receive your money back with interest or you could receive stock?
We have agreements.
What type of agreements?
Loan agreements signed with the farms.
And who, if anyone, announced the farm loan program?
Miles Guo announced.
At that time, in 2020, were you a member of any farm?
Yes, I am.
Which farm were you a member of at that time?
The first farm on social is called UK London Club.
Did you participate in the farm loan program?
Yes, I did.
With which farm did you participate in the farm loan program?
UK London Club.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can you publish Government Exhibit VO-22, which is in evidence? Mr. Zhou, do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is this?
This a farm loan agreement.
What is the name of the borrower listed on this agreement?
It's US Himalaya Capital Inc.
What farm, if any, is US Himalaya Capital Incorporated associated with?
This is a farm UK London Club farm.
And the lender listed there, whose name is that?
That's my name.
What date did you enter into this loan agreement, the UK farm?
August 24, 2020.
And under the terms of this loan agreement, what was the stated use of the loan that you provided to the UK London Club?
It's for the general working capital purpose for the farm.
How much did you invest in the farm loan program?
$21,000.
Ms. Murray said, we could take this down, Ms. Loftus. Mr. Zhou, at the time that you signed the loan agreement in August of 2020, what was your understanding of how your money would be used?
For the farm to establish offices, hiring staffs, and other corporate operation expenses.
And at that time in August 2020, what was your understanding of what you would get, if anything, in exchange for your loan to the UK farm?
It was 8% for 3 years term.
At that time, in August 2020, why did you participate in the farm loan program?
Because I want to help the farm and I want to get the stocks.
And what type of stock did you expect you would get in exchange for your loan to the UK farm?
The GTV common stocks.
Why did you believe that you would get GTV stock in exchange for making a loan to the farm?
Because that was part of what Miles Guo introduced this project, as investment opportunities.
Did there come a time when Miles Guo announced another investment opportunity that was called G Clubs?
Yes.
When was that?
It was same year, 2020 introduced.
At that time, in 2020, what did you understand G Clubs to be?
G Club is to as other exclusive club for high net worth people, individual to have. To show your status. But as we are already investing to GTV, our wealth in the future will be tremendous big. So this club is created to also to serve additional as a financed project will have another features to give to those members. So that's a club was created.
The court said, what do you mean by exclusive club?
The witness said, yes, Your Honor. Exclusive, this Miles Guo mention about other society has those club. Like royal family. This particular club, for example, Masons, there's other clubs. So he want create some similar clubs for particular individuals, which is this is among the NFSC members. By Ms. Murray.
At that time, in 2020, did you understand that G Club had any physical locations, any actual club location?
No.
At that time, in 2020, what, to your understanding, would you get in exchange for investing in G Clubs?
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection to form, Your Honor.
The court said, rephrase please.
Ms. Murray said, yes, Your Honor. In 2020, what did you understand the G Club investment opportunity to be?
Mr. Kamaraju said, Your Honor, I'm going to continue to object. I can explain at sidebar.
Ms. Murray said, if I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Counsel conferred.
Ms. Murray said, may I try again, Your Honor?
The court said, go ahead.
Ms. Murray said, thank you. Mr. Zhou, in 2020, what did you understand that paying money to G clubs would give you?
Yes. There was offer the members will give stocks, the G Club stocks. Second, we'll get passports. Third, we'll get another investments called exchange of coins. Fourth, we'll get discount-rated deals from travel agencies or even shoppings, like luxury airjets, Bombardier. And the last one was for discount shopping on G Fashion.
Taking those in turn, starting with the last, what was G Fashion?
G Fashion is part of the G series. It's clothing for fashion where you can shop luxury clothes.
Where were G Fashion items sold, if anywhere?
Was sold in the States, United States.
You mentioned that you had an understanding at that time in 2020 that you could get other benefits in exchange for paying money to G clubs. Is that right?
Yes.
What was that understanding based on at that time?
That was introduced by Miles Guo.
What was the cost of a G Club's membership in 2020?
G Club membership has 5 tiers. The first tier is $10,000, with each $10,000 increasement to top 5 tiers.
So for the top tier, what was the cost of a top tier membership at that time?
That would be $50,000.
Did there come a time when you purchased any G Club's memberships?
Yes, I did.
When was that?
That in September 2021.
And how many memberships did you purchase?
I purchased 2, Tier 2 and Tier 5.
What was the cost of the Tier 2 membership?
That's $20,000.
And what was the cost of the Tier 5 membership?
$50,000.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can we please publish what's in evidence as Government Exhibit VO 25? Zoom in on the top portion. Actually, the body of this. Mr. Zhou, what is this?
That's my G Club membership notification after the application was approved.
And looking at the initial line, it's addressed to someone. Can you read what that reads?
I'm sorry, could you please?
Sure. Starting with the word my at the beginning of this notification, what does that line say?
My dear fellow fighters.
And then looking down at the bottom of this, who signed, or who is this notification from? According to body of this email?
The name signed, Guo Wen. That's Miles Guo.
And how is he described here?
G Club's official spokesperson.
How did you pay for your G Club's memberships?
I paid by checks.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, can we please take this down and publish Government Exhibit VO 26, which is in evidence? Mr. Zhou, do you recognize these?
Yes.
Are these the checks that you sent to become a G Club's member?
Yes.
What is the date of each of these checks?
The first check, August 24, 2021.
And the second?
August 25, 2021.
And looking at the memo line, there is some text in the memo line of each of these checks. What, if anything, does that text indicate?
That's indicate my application numbers.
The court said, Sir, other than the payment of money, was there any other requirement or criteria in order to join the club?
The witness said, yes, Your Honor. To join the club, you have to be a follow members, which is the I have received members. And to purchase at a beginning, it wasn't required for the only members, and it has previously investing the GTVs, and also donated to Rule of Law Foundation. By Ms. Murray.
So in submitting an application for a G Club's membership, what information, if any, were you required to provide about prior donations to Rule of Law or prior investment in GTV?
We have to include input or assign the investment IDs and which farm we were associated with into applications.
Ms. Murray said, and if we could go back, Ms. Loftus, to Government Exhibit VO 25. If we could zoom in on the first paragraph. Please, that starts with, congratulations. Mr. Zhou, can you just read the text here starting with, congratulations?
Yes. Congratulations. I am pleased to announce that your Tier 5 membership to G Clubs has been approved. As a spokesman for G Clubs, I extend a warm welcome to your membership to the future.
Ms. Murray said, we can take that down. Mr. Zhou, did you receive any stock shares in exchange for your G Club's membership payment?
No.
You mentioned that there were discounts that you could use as a G Club's member. Where could you use those discounts?
Mean I use on gfashion.com.
Did you purchase any items from gfashion.com?
Yes.
Did you purchase some of those items before you became a G Club's member?
Yes.
Did you purchase some items after you became a G Club's member?
Yes.
Can you describe the quality of the items that you purchased from G Fashion?
The quality itself is very ordinary, normal, compared to what I think the clothes we normally get.
I'd like to look at a few of the items that you purchased from G Fashion. Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, may I approach?
The court said yes.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, I'm handing the witness what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibits 32, 33, 34, and 35. Mr. Zhou, do you recognize Government Exhibits 32, 33, 34, and 35?
Yes.
What are they?
Those are my purchase item from gfashion.com.
Are those just some of the items that you purchased from G Fashion?
Yes.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, the government would move to admit Government Exhibits 32, 33, 34, and 35.
Mr. Kamarju said, no objection.
The court said, they are admitted.
Government's Exhibits 32, 33, 34, 35 received in evidence.
If you could start with Government Exhibit 32, please, Mr. Zhou, and hold that up for the jury. What is Government Exhibit 32?
That's a baseball cap.
And where did you purchase that?
gfashion.com.
What was the approximate cost of that baseball cap?
This I remember cost close to $200.
If you could please hold up Government Exhibit 34. What is that item?
Just a regular shirt.
And is that one of the items that you purchased from G Fashion?
Yes.
What was the approximate cost of that t-shirt?
This one was about $150.
And now if you can please pull up or hold up Government Exhibit 33.
Yes.
What is Government Exhibit 33?
This is silk pants, ladies wear.
What was the approximate price of those pants on G Fashion?
It was listed about $800.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, if we could show the witness what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit W58.
The court said, all right.
Ms. Murray said, While we're waiting, Your Honor, may I publish Government Exhibits 32, 33, and 34 to the jury?
The court said you may.
Ms. Murray said, Thank you. Mr. Zhou, do you recognize Government Exhibit W58?
Yes.
Ms. Murray said, If we could scroll down a bit, Ms. Loftus. Have you visited the website that's depicted in Government Exhibit 58 before?
Yes, I did.
Ms. Murray said, We would move to admit Government Exhibit W58.
Mr. Kamarju said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit W58 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, If we'd please publish that, Ms. Loftus. We could start up at the top. Mr. Zhou, what website is shown in Government Exhibit 58?
This is a G Fashion website.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, if we could scroll down a bit, please. Looking at the right there, do you see G Fashion silk pant?
Yes.
What is the listed price of that item?
$880.
And is that the same item that is in Government Exhibit 33?
Correct.
Ms. Murray said, We can take that down, Ms. Loftus. One more physical exhibit that you have, Mr. Zhou, Government Exhibit 35. If you could take that out. What is Government Exhibit 35?
Yes. This is a gold limited edition whistles.
How was that item advertised on the G Fashion website?
Advertises only was 77 made and it's 24K.
What was the cost of that whistle?
I paid about $3,200 for it.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, if we could please publish what's in evidence as Government Exhibit VO 67. Mr. Zhou, what is Government Exhibit VO 67?
That's paid receipt confirmation email.
And that's for the whistle that is Government Exhibit 35?
Correct.
What material did you say that the whistle was advertised as?
24K gold.
Do you have an understanding or an impression of whether that whistle was, in fact, gold?
Mr. Kumraju said, Objection, Your Honor.
The court said, Sustained.
Mr. Zhou, have you weighed that whistle?
I did.
How much did it weigh approximately?
Mr. Kumraju said, Objection, Your Honor.
The court said, Overruled. You may answer.
0.7 ounce.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, permission to publish Government Exhibit 35 to the jury.
The court said you may.
Mr. Zhou, why, if at all, did you weigh the whistle after you purchased it?
I was just curious about if real or not.
What do you mean if it was real or not?
Mr. Kumraju said, Objection.
The court said, Overruled. You may answer.
When I first received the packaging, when I first opened, I saw a little bit dust go on it. The gold itself the craftsmanship was little bit rough. My knowledge. This is a limited edition as collectible items, that made me little bit concerned.
Mr. Zhou, returning to. Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, we can take that down. Thank you. Returning to what you expected or understood that you would receive in exchange for paying money to G clubs. I think you mentioned a currency, is that correct?
Yes.
What was that? Can you explain that to the jury?
It is currency introduced called G dollar and the G coins. It was digital currency and also digital cryptocurrencies that also will be launched from exchange.
And when you say exchange, what are you referring to?
At the time we have a change is called Himalaya Exchange.
At that time in 2021, when you invested in, when you paid for a G Club's memberships. What was your understanding of what the Himalaya Exchange was?
Himalaya Exchange was another part of G series for financial freedom created by Milesqua. And it gave people much better opportunity to transfer monies instantly. Also no boundaries. And also for the most securities you will get.
And at that time, in 2021, what was your understanding about the Himalaya Exchange based on?
The G dollar was equal to $1 values, and will have gold standards for the H coins. The full name? It's Himalaya Coins, it's backed by 20% gold. So that adds all the value to it.
Why, if at all, did you believe in the time, in 2021, that the Himalaya currencies were backed 20% by gold?
Milesqua personally announced that.
To your knowledge, at that time, in 2021, who was in charge of the Himalaya Exchange?
The person, I don't know.
At that time, in 2021, who, if anyone, promoted the Himalaya Exchange?
Milesqua promoted Himalaya Exchange.
Did there come a time when you purchased any of the digital currencies that were available on the Himalaya Exchange?
No.
Why not?
Because there's a policy, it's restricted to sell to the residents in the States.
And how was it your understanding at that time, in 2021, that it was restricted?
Also Milesqua mentioned that.
Did there come a time when you sent money to purchase Himalaya coin or Himalaya dollars?
I didn't send money to get Himalaya dollars, but I was given opportunity to purchase H coins.
And what was that opportunity?
That opportunity is based on my previous G-series investments and donations for the previous investment. Also, I'm a follower of this movement, the opportunity was given to me.
Who, if anyone, gave you the opportunity to purchase H coins?
Miles Squad gave us the opportunity.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus. If we could please pull up for the witness what's marked for identification as government exhibits VO 107 and VO 108. Mr. Zhou, do you recognize these?
Yes.
Generally speaking, what are they?
On the right side.
Sorry. Just a moment, sir. If you could, just at a general level, what type of document or item is this?
That's my personal investment summary.
And are these contents that were taken from your phone?
From my computers.
Did you provide these to the government?
Yes, I did.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, the government moves to admit government exhibits VO 107 and VO 108.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no objection to their admission, Your Honor.
The court said, they are admitted.
Government's exhibits VO 107, VO 108 received in evidence.
The court said, it's now 11:30 members of the jury, so we're going to take our half-hour break. Remember that I need for you to be ready to walk through that door at noon. Remember also that you're not allowed to discuss this case amongst yourselves, or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. Sir, you are not to discuss your testimony.
Jury not present.
The court said, you may be seated. Counsel, anything before we come back for our break?
Mr. Kamaraju said, not from the defense, Your Honor.
Ms. Murray said, not from the government, Your Honor.
The court said, all right then. You may step down.
The witness said, thank you, Your Honor. Luncheon recess. Continued on next page. Afternoon session 12 p.m.
The court said, please be seated. Please have the jurors brought in. And please have the witness resume the stand.
Ms. Murray said, yes, Your Honor.
Jury present.
The court said, please be seated. Remember, sir, that you are still under oath.
The witness said, yes, Your Honor.
The court said, you may proceed with the direct examination.
Ms. Murray said, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gartland, if you could please publish for the jury, alongside one another, Government Exhibits V0107 and V0108.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, before we took a break, I believe we were talking about the Himalaya exchange. We're going to pull up Government Exhibits V0107 and V0108. Ms. Murray said, Mr. Gartland, if you could just unpublish while you're pulling those up. Thank you. I guess, Mr. Zhou, while we're waiting, you had mentioned that there were certain restrictions on purchasing Himalaya coin. Can you explain those to the jury? Please, your understanding in 2021 on what those restrictions were.
Yes. To allow to purchase H coin, you have to got to be a member of the farms, which you have to join the movement. Then based on that, it's all based on your previous investment, including donations. So once all that been counted, then you were able to get a pre-launch of the coins and at a discounted rate.
What do you mean by pre-launch?
Because this coin was launched on November 1st, 2021. All the investments was previously invested was counted towards to how much coin you could get.
And who, if anyone, calculated the amount of investment that you had pre-launch of the Himalaya coins?
The rule of guidance was set by Himalaya Alliance. For previous GTV there was deadline also. Made that draw line. For September 31st, anything donate investment, you place it before. You will get $1 investment for 0.5 coins. Any investments after that deadline, it's counted as $1 investment for 0.2 coins.
And who, if anyone, set those deadlines?
The deadline was announced by Milesqua.
Where was that announced?
During his broadcast.
At the time of the Himalaya coin launch in November of 2021, were you a member of any farms?
Yes.
Which farms?
UK London Club.
Did you communicate with anybody from the UK London Club regarding the Himalaya coin?
Yes.
With whom did you communicate about Himalaya coin?
I contacted the farm leaders.
Who was the farm leader of the UK farm at that time?
His name is David Dai.
How do you spell that last name?
Dai.
Can you describe what communications or conversations you had with David Dai at that time about Himalaya coin?
There were one for the resident in the States and other prohibited country couldn't purchase the Himalaya coin directly. That global alliance, Himalaya Alliance, established a business as nominee shareholdings to held those people's coins. Besides that, the farm also established Business Act as a nominee shareholdings to held those people's coins. Which I was included.
What business are you referring to that the farm established, or the alliance? Excuse me.
From the alliance, the company created called Freedom Media Venture Ltd.
And can you explain for the jury what you mean and you described Freedom Media Venture as a nominee?
Nominees act as on your behalf to hold your coins, for example.
And at that time, in the fall of 2021, how was it your understanding that Freedom Media Venture was a nominee?
It was public announced by Miles Guo.
And what role, if any, did Freedom Media Venture have with respect to money that you paid for Himalaya coins?
The Freedom Media Venture, that company was a new company created for the GTV. So was announced that for those people who are in the restricted countries, then they will able to sign a contract and also offer, there was also fee will be charged was announced to us. He explained it to us.
Who explained that to you?
Miles Guo mentioned it and also the other farm leader mentioned it.
What was the nature of the fee?
The fee I got was of 5%.
The court said, "What do you mean by restricted country?"
The witness said, "Yes, Your Honor. The Himalaya Exchange has a policy, and the policy laid out. There were countries not on their list, a permitted list to purchase or do any business or even become a user. The country were United States, Canada, Japan, North Korea, and other essential countries."
The court said, "You may continue."
Ms. Murray said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, for those restricted countries that you just mentioned, did you have an understanding of whether people who were located in those countries could invest in Himalaya coin?
Yes.
What was that understanding at that time, in 2021?
So that this create a nominee shareholding companies that were able to have them as our shareholders. 2. To obtain the coins.
And did you in fact send money to purchase Himalaya coins through that nominee shareholder?
I didn't send the money direct to the shareholder. I send money to the farm.
Which farm?
UK London Club.
Did you enter into any kind? Was there any understanding between you and the UK London farm of what the purpose of the money that you sent was for?
Yes.
What was that understanding?
There were agreement, I signed it, with the farm leader, David Dai. He created a company act as the nominee shareholding company.
And generally speaking, what were the terms of that agreement that you entered into with the UK farm leader?
The term were just, they will hold my coins and also I have to pay the fee, annual fee to it. But in the future, once the Himalaya Exchange acquired legal license, was able to expand the territory, which the restriction related to those countries, especially to the United States. Then I would be able to use my own username accounts that would transfer the coins back to me.
And how was it your understanding at that time in 2021 that that's how the nominee shareholder kind of investment would work?
I'm sorry. Just one more time repeat the question.
Yeah, of course. So in 2021, how was it your understanding that at some point in the future you would be able to register your own account on the Himalaya Exchange?
Yes, mentioned by Miles Guo, yes.
So at the time that you sent money to the UK farm for the purchase of Himalaya coins, what assets, if any, did you have to the Himalaya Exchange?
I don't.
At that time in 2021, how, if at all, were you able to check the number of Himalaya coins that you held, that you had paid for?
Because the farm has my investment summaries and the summary document. all the investment I have previously invested, and also, there were ratios for the coins was calculated. The information was provided to me.
Provided to you by whom?
By one of the members, from UK London Club.
After you purchased Himalaya coin in 2021 through the UK farm, how, if at all, were you able to use that digital currency to purchase things?
Because I don't have access, so I don't know how you spend that.
Between your investment in 2021 and today, the present, have you had access to the Himalaya exchange?
No.
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection to form.
The court said, overruled.
Between your investment in 2021 and today, did there come a time when you were able to spend your Himalaya coin to purchase anything?
No.
I want to turn back for a moment, Mr. Zhou, to the volunteer work that you did for the whistleblower movement. Can you just remind the jury generally what types of services you provided?
Yes. I did video transcript, also translations, videos editing, and also streaming services. For the Himalaya Alliance, and the farm members.
In connection with your volunteer work, did there come times when you participated in meetings with other volunteers?
Yes.
What types of meetings?
Those are private meeting with Miles Guo, with the farm members.
What was the nature of the meeting? Where did you all meet?
We used the social platform called WebEx.
And what, if anything, was discussed during meetings among the volunteers over WebEx?
These meetings include briefing of the farm movements, activities, also the followers' investments. And also some other issues, among just farm and the Global Alliance, and also, there were, at the time, the Global Alliance. One wanted to create a central data center to centralize all the investors' investment informations. And those meeting was conducted, and also Global Alliance asked each farm, come to the farm meetings. Give them guidelines, have them to turn over all their bookkeepings. And also the balance to the designated accounts by the Himalaya Global Alliance.
Mr. Zhou, in the course of your volunteer work, you said you were involved with streaming broadcasts. Did that include broadcasts relating to activities by the NFSC?
Yes.
Did that include broadcasts relating to protests?
Yes.
What types of protests did you stream broadcasts of, in your volunteer work?
In late 2022, there were protests. A name called 90 Days Protest was protesting one of Miles Guo attorneys and their attorney firms.
What, generally, was the subject matter of the 90 Days protest?
There was involved with Miles Guo's bankruptcy cases. And so the protest was because Miles Guo announced he was being extorted by one of the attorneys for the amount of $250 million.
Taking a step back for a moment. Did there come a time when you learned that Miles Guo had filed for bankruptcy?
Yes.
Around when did you learn that?
Miles Guo personally did on his broadcast, on February 15, 2022.
What, if anything, did Miles Guo say during his broadcast about having filed for bankruptcy?
He just mentioned, I'm signing today my bankruptcy, and because I'm being persecuted.
By whom, if anyone, did Miles Guo claim that he was being persecuted?
He mentioned the persecution from CCP and also he mentioned some of the CCP penetrated U.S. justice.
At the time that Miles Guo said that in February of 2022, did you believe that he was filing bankruptcy in part because he was being persecuted by the CCP?
At that time I believed it.
Returning to the 90 Days protest, around when did the 90 Days protests begin?
The 90 days started towards to end of October 2022, and last.
Sorry. Go ahead.
And last until end of January.
And why, if at all, were NFSC members protesting during that time period?
Because Miles Guo announced that extortion from the bankruptcy cases. And so there were protests started at multiple locations.
Can you explain what you mean when you say that Miles Guo announced extortion?
During his broadcast he mentioned he was being extorted by this attorney, and also he mentioned the amount. $250 million.
And which attorney?
The attorney name is Luke Despens.
Based on Miles Guo's broadcast, what was your understanding of Luke Despens' role, if any, in the bankruptcy?
He was court-appointed trustee for Miles Guo.
And at that time in 2022 what, if anything, did Miles Guo say about the $250 million that you mentioned?
He said, "That's unbelievable, outrageous." He was mad about that.
The court said, when you say court-appointed trustee, what court are you referring to?
The witness said, yes, Your Honor. I believe that's New York Southern District Bankruptcy Court.
Mr. Zhou, against whom were the protests directed, the 90 days protests in 2022?
There were protests at the attorney Luke, attorney's home, his daughter's universities, his ex-wife's home, his law firm office, and one of his associates' attorney's home, and one of Luke's second daughter's workplace.
Who, if anyone, directed the protests?
Right after Miles mentioned about this extortion, then the Himalaya Global Alliance initiate launch all the protests.
Can you describe how the Himalaya Global Alliance launched the protests?
It was organized so the recording of sending out the form to the farms, asking who willing to come to the protests, and we also received information that this protest will last 90 days. So the farm leaders started gathering the information, putting people in place, and was also printing materials for the protests.
Which farm leader are you referring to?
At the time I'm associated with the new farm, it's called the Washington, D.C. farm.
And what types of materials did the farm leader print in connection with the 90 days protests?
There were posters, banners, and flyers.
Can you describe for the jury some of the posters that were created for the protests?
Yes. Some poster have the attorney's Luke's image, his photos on it, but was altered. Was also added with titles, especially some offensive, some kind of meaningful, very mean labels on that posters.
What are some examples of the language that was added to those posters that were used in connection with the protests?
Mostly they called him CCP running dog, evil.
At the time of the 90 days protests in 2022, did you believe that Luke Despens was, and I'm quoting the language, a CCP running dog?
At that time I believed it.
Why did you believe it?
Because Miles Guo mentioned the extortion and Miles Guo mentioned Luke Despens' firms was bribed by the CCP.
At the time in 2022, did you have any personal knowledge of whether Luke Despens had extorted or attempted to extort Miles Guo?
No.
At the time in 2022, did you have any personal knowledge of whether Luke Despens' firm had been influenced by the CCP?
No.
Sitting here today, do you believe that Luke Despens was operating on behalf of the CCP?
Mr. Kumraju said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, if you'll step up, please.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
The court said, why would his belief today be relevant?
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor. Because it goes to the fact that at the time he was operating on, his intent to behave and participate in the protest was what he was told by Mr. Guo.
The court said, so you've established that.
Ms. Murray said, yes.
The court said, but then you've asked what he believes now, and I'm trying to understand why that would be relevant.
Ms. Murray said, I think it goes, Your Honor, to what I'm going to be getting to at the end. Which is when he came to the realization that this was all fraudulent. He was a believer in Miles Guo up until basically after the arrest. And then at some point he came to realize that what Miles Guo was telling him about the CCP's influence, about, the closing bank accounts because of the CCP, about all these activities was not in fact true. And that was the moment when he kind of came to the realization. And I expect that Mr. Kumraju is going to be cross-examining him on what his belief was at the time and what, why he is now testifying for the government. And I'm just trying to establish that.
Mr. Kumraju said, well, I don't think his belief sitting here today on the stand as to whether Mr. Despens is an agent of the CCP has any relevance to the line of inquiry that Ms. Murray is talking about. If she wants to ask him questions like, when did you become suspicious? That's still at a point back in time, has nothing to do with what he's saying now, what he's getting at now.
The court said, so stick to that sort of question.
Ms. Murray said, okay.
Mr. Kamaraju said, thank you, Your Honor.
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, you may continue.
Ms. Murray said, thank you, Your Honor.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, what, if anything, was your role with respect to the 90 days protest?
My role was streaming technician. I use software to push out the broadcast. I connect the farm and the guests. Also, I make schedule for the technician parts, who do that daily streamings.
And who, if anyone, gave you instructions regarding how to stream the 90 days protests?
There were guidelines provided by the Himalaya Global Alliance, some guidelines specific. During the protests, if we hear any of the guests, or the farm guests, that mention Miles Guo, or if they say something that was organized, we'll cut the streaming.
Can you just explain that guideline a little bit more so that the jury understands? What was the instruction that was given regarding streaming if someone mentioned Miles Guo?
Yes. Because all the streaming was conduct lively. There were people at the protest locations linked to remote guests. As technician on the back end. So we would receive these instructions, if either one inside the streaming, the image, or guests spoke that. I'm here protest today, it's because Miles told me, or the organization told me come, if that word said. We'll automatic cut the streamings.
And did there come a time when you were streaming the 90 days protests that you had to cut the transmission because of a reference to Miles Guo?
I personally did once.
I'd like to return for a moment to the Himalaya coin investment. Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, if you could please publish what's in evidence as Government Exhibit V0107 and V0108. All right. Actually, we'll move along for a moment. Ms. Loftus, if you could please publish Government Exhibit V0105.
Sorry. Got it.
Mr. Zhou, do you recognize Government Exhibit V0105?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a meeting attended on WebEx with Miles Guo and the UK London Club members.
Starting at the top left, who is that in the screen that's shown on the top left?
That's me.
And just to the right of you, who is that?
Miles Guo.
In the image next to Miles Guo, on the other side of you, it appears that there's a poster. Can you read what that poster says?
Yes, thank you. Speaking Himalaya London Club UK. Host.
Sorry. Just to the left of that, there's a screen with just a white wall and a poster. What does that poster say?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Got it. New Federal State of China.
And now going one further to the right, which you just read. What is it indicating about the person who's depicted in that screen?
That's UK London Club leader David Dye, and he hosts the WebEx software. The meeting was launched by his account.
And do you recognize the flag behind David Dye?
Yes.
What is it?
That's NFSC flag.
Ms. Murray said, Ms. Loftus, if we could take that down and put up for the witness what's marked as Government Exhibit V0106. Your Honor, just in an abundance of caution, the government moves to admit the prior exhibit, which is Government Exhibit V0105.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no objection, Your Honor.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit V0105 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, and this is Government Exhibit V0106. This is shown just to the witness right now.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, do you recognize Government Exhibit V0106?
Yes.
Generally speaking, what is it?
It's another meeting I participated. This meeting was with Miles Guo and it was Iron Blood members with other farm members.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, the government moves to admit Government Exhibit V0106.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no objection.
The court said, "It is admitted."
Government's Exhibit V0106 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, "Could we please publish?"
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, starting at the top left here, who is depicted there on the top left of this screenshot.
It's another farm leader.
The leader of which farm?
Japan, Tokyo Stellar IS Farm.
On the top right, who is depicted in the screen that's shown there?
He's NFSC chairman.
And then looking at the bottom left, who is the person standing in what's depicted there?
Miles Guo was standing.
Ms. Murray said, "Ms. Loftus, if we could zoom in on that bottom left screen, please." Mr. Zhou, do you recognize anyone else who is depicted in that particular screenshot?
Yes.
Who?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes.
Can you describe, generally speaking, who these people are and what their roles were?
Right next to the Miles Guo, this lady, her name is called Justice Sarah.
And then the male depicted seated kind of in the back on the left side?
Yeah. His name Long Island David.
What farm, if any, is Long Island David associated with?
He was associated with Mountain Spice, New York.
And then to the right, the individual who is second from the right in the back of the table here?
Her name was Fei Fei.
And then finally, the person who's farthest right in this photo?
Her name was Ruth Ray.
Generally speaking, what was discussed during this meeting that you participated in?
This meeting was gathered a lot of other farms management team, farm leaders, and some even invited members. Discuss about some issues reported to the Himalaya Global Alliance.
Ms. Murray said, "You can take that down, Ms. Loftus." Thank you. Mr. Zhou, did there come a time when the UK farm asked for your assistance with certain banking activities?
Yes.
Around when was that?
That's February 2022.
And who was the leader of the UK farm at the time?
David Dye.
Can you describe for the jury what, if anything, David Dye asked you to do?
Yes. He called me personally, asked me if I could help this farm and help all the followers to receive money and to help them to invest into the G-series.
And what, if anything, did David Dye say about why he wanted your assistance?
Because he had few other people established business and open banking accounts, but they were shut down. And they needed still people to open more accounts to help the followers.
What, if anything, did David Dye say about why those accounts had been shut down?
Some accounts, they were just mentioned because of CCP don't want those people to invest. And all CCP is doing, those accounts were being shut down.
At that time in February of 2022, did you believe that bank accounts had been closed because of the CCP?
Yes, at that time I believed.
What, if anything, did David Dye direct you to do with respect to opening bank accounts?
Yes. We talked about how to open an account, what to tell the bank. And also gave me instruction with open business, we'll have him as 100% owner.
And what, if anything, did David Dye tell you to tell the bank as the purpose of those accounts?
Because of course David Dye also knows about my personal life as also my occupancy, sick, as a realtor. So he instructed that he mentioned it will be easier if I mention this account when we establish it's for real estate development. They're also matching my current occupancy so that will not trigger much of the flack. That will be more susceptible to open the account.
Did you follow David Dye's instructions and in fact open bank accounts?
Yes, I did.
After you opened those bank accounts, did money come into the accounts?
Yes.
Approximately how much money, in total?
Estimate about $2 million.
Were you able to determine the source of the money that came into your bank accounts that you opened?
I only able to see the wire, if it's from individual, or some of the wires, it's from business accounts.
Do you know how those individuals knew to send money to your bank accounts?
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, "Sustained."
Mr. Zhou, you mentioned that you saw incoming wires into the accounts, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you provide the account information to any of the individuals who wired money into your accounts?
No.
Do you know who, if anyone, provided your bank account information to those individuals?
Yes.
Who?
One of the member from UK London Club.
What, if anything, did you do with the money that came into your bank accounts that you had set up?
When I see the money, I will bookkeep, document it with a spreadsheet created by the UK leader. Once reached certain amount, I would receive instruction to where to send the money to.
From whom, if anyone, did you receive instructions regarding where to send the money?
The farm, the UK leader, and also other few the UK members.
Were you paid for opening those accounts?
No.
Did you keep any of the money that came through those accounts?
No.
I want to return for a moment to the Himalaya exchange. Ms. Murray said, I'm going to try to do this old school. Your Honor, these are, again, V0107 and 108. I believe just before the break these were admitted, but again, in an abundance of caution. If they weren't formally admitted, we would move to admit.
The court said, no objection?
Mr. Kamaraju said, no, Your Honor.
The court said, they are admitted.
Government's exhibits V0107 and V0108 received in evidence.
Ms. Murray said, so this is Government Exhibit V0107. If we could publish to the jury. Can we publish that, please? Thank you.
By Ms. Murray.
Mr. Zhou, before we took the break, we were looking at this. This was something that was sent. I believe you said it was in your computer, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you prepare this spreadsheet?
No.
Do you know who prepared this spreadsheet?
I don't know.
Who sent this to you?
One of the UK member.
I want to just talk through a couple of the different columns here and what's reflected. First of all, there is a column, the second column says Discord. Do you see that?
Yes.
What information is shown there?
Coffee cantata, then 2 Chinese words.
Do you know who, if anyone, uses the Discord username Coffee Cantata?
I used it.
Looking across the rows here. Can you explain for the jury what information is reflected in the top portion of this spreadsheet?
Sure. Under the member ID number, member, UK 2020H170, its unique ID assigned to me for investment. Move to the right, after the Discord, on top account called as 005. That's the investment account calls created by the Himalaya Global Alliance. Right next to it, coin rates. That reflects to Himalaya coins, as 0.5. Then right after, it's the Chinese translate to investment a month. Then right after, next column, it's Chinese reflect to translate to welfare coins numbers, which reflect to H coins numbers.
So focusing on the different rows, and is it correct that the second to the most right column, the one with the little emoji or the icon, that column reflects investment amounts, is that correct?
Yes.
So taking the first row, what investment, if any, is reflected there at 59.93?
That reflected to an investment called Apple Coins.
And was that an investment that you made in connection with the G series offerings?
Yes.
Looking at the next row, 31,300, what investment, if any, does that reflect?
That reflect to VOG investments.
And that was in connection with which company's private placement?
Guo Media's GTV placement.
Looking at the next 2 rows, both of them have account code 8142. 50,000 and 20,000. What investment, if any, does that relate to?
The $50,000 reflect to my G Club Tier 5 investments, $20,000 reflect to G Club Tier 2 investments.
And then the next row, the 21,000, what investment, if any, does that reflect?
That reflect to my UK Farm Loan Agreement investments.
And finally, the row that's 1,500, what, if anything, does that reflect?
That reflected to my donations.
And so looking at the rightmost column. What information is in the rightmost column that was relevant to your Himalaya coin purchase?
So that's using the coin rates calculation, 0.5, multiplied by my investment, how much coin I will receive.
And how much coin did you receive based on your prior investments?
40,935 coins.
Ms. Murray said, we can take this down. Mr. Zhou. Did there come a time when you requested a refund of any of the money that you had invested in the G series?
Yes, I did.
Approximately when was that?
July 15, 2023.
And which money, if any, did you request to have refunded?
I request my G Club investment refund.
How did you request a refund of your G Club investment?
As instructed, for all the matters, I shall contact the farm leader first, so I contact Washington, D.C. farm leader to request the refund.
And what, if anything, was the response to your refund request?
It wasn't a pleasant. First they just provide a request form, asked me to fill it out.
Did you complete that form?
Yes, I did.
What happened next?
Then for a very long period of time I didn't get any response. So I have to contact them back and do a follow-up, multiple follow-ups. But they were trying to verify my investments. Then later, they asked me to fill out my request form. They asked me they only will return HDO to me, not as fiat currency to me.
And just to be clear, when you say HDO, what are you referring to?
Himalaya dollars.
The court said, and what do you mean by fiat currency?
The witness said, because all my investment originally sent it to investment. G-series investment using wires. Paid in the dollar.
The court said, so you're saying dollars are fiat currency?
The witness said, correct. By Ms. Murray.
And Mr. Zhou, at the time that the farm offered to refund your G Club's money in HDO. Did you have access to a Himalaya exchange account?
I don't.
Did you have access to any of the Himalaya coins that you had sent money to the farm to purchase?
I don't.
At that time that you requested the refund and it was offered in HDO. Did you have personal knowledge whether you in fact owned Himalaya coins or Himalaya dollars?
I addressed that.
What do you mean by that?
I told them that this request to return my investment in HDO is not acceptable because I don't have HDO accounts, Himalaya exchange accounts, so I said I will only receive in the currency which is fiat currency.
And what, if anything, was the response to your saying that you wouldn't accept HDO for your refund?
So there's another long period of waiting time. They just asked me to wait.
Did there come a time when you received a refund of your G Club's money?
Yes, I did.
Around when was that?
December 1st, 2023.
And what were the circumstances of your receiving that refund?
I have to sign a forfeit H-coin agreement and I also have to return some equipments to them. So that's all the terms I have to agree to.
Taking the equipment, what type of equipment were you required to return?
Just because I was, as a streaming technician, Washington, D.C. Farm sent over certain equipment for the broadcast equipments I at the time was holding. So in a month, once I request my refund, they would ask me to also return the equipment as well.
You also mentioned you had to sign something forfeiting your Himalaya coin for the refund. Can you explain that to the jury, please?
Yes. Since I made a refund request, then they also send me agreement that I have to forfeit all the H-coin was previously acquired from investments.
And how much had you paid for that H-coin that you had to forfeit?
Total, I paid $5,500 for the coins.
Did you in fact sign that agreement to forfeit the $5,500 worth of H-coin?
I have no choice. I was forced to sign that.
At some point after you requested a refund of your G Club money, how, if at all, did the whistleblower movement respond?
From
Mr. Kamaraju said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, as to form sustained.
Mr. Zhou, did anyone within the whistleblower movement, to your knowledge, become aware that you'd requested a refund?
Mr. Kamraju said, objection, Your Honor. Same.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Zhou, did there come a time when you were removed from the UK farm?
Yes.
Can you describe what happened?
Right after I returned equipment, the farm leader just removed me out of the Discord server. Cut all the communications, and also they removed me out of all the working channels, either the farm, Discord, WhatsApp. I was completely removed.
Around when did that happen that you were removed from the farm Discord channel?
That was in September 2023.
Directing your attention to January of 2024, did there come a time when your information was posted on Getter?
Mr. Kamraju said, objection to form, Your Honor. What information?
The court said, sustained.
Ms. Murray said, why don't we just pull up Government Exhibit V02, which is in evidence? Mr. Zhou, do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a post on guitarasocialmedia.com.
And can you just remind the jury what Getter is?
Yes, Getter was of the G series. It's a social platform created by Guo and it's similar as the Twitters.
Looking at the English translation that was associated with this post. Can you read the title of this announcement?
Global Himalayan Farm Alliance Blacklist Announcement.
What, if anything, do you understand a blacklist to be with respect to the Himalaya Farm Alliance?
For anyone accused to or against this movement, or Guo personally, would be put on the blacklist.
Looking at item 2 that's listed here, can you please read that?
I'm sorry. One more time, please.
Yes. Can you read item 2 that's listed here?
Yes. On January 21, 2024, Washington, D.C. Farm and the Collations made the following blacklist decision, blacklisted. Coffee Cantata, Wenlu, in Chinese. Number 5082 Coffee Cantata. Reason for exclusion. Malicious attack on whistleblower revolution and the G series. Blacklist persons have the right to submit an appeal within 5 days of the day of announcement. An appeal will be ignored.
Mr. Zhou, Coffee Cantata, that's the username that you used?
Yes.
Were you given any notice in advance of this blacklist announcement being posted on Getter?
No.
What was your reaction, if any, to being posted publicly on the blacklist?
First, I saw this afterwards. That's just not the truth. I never attacked the whistleblower movement. Or the G series.
Did you appeal this blacklist decision?
Because what I saw was already after the appeal dates, allowance dates.
Ms. Murray said, we can take this down, Ms. Loftus. Thank you.
The court said, what is your answer, sir? She asked whether you appealed.
The witness said, I couldn't because I saw this post was after this appealing allowance dates.
The court said, you may continue.
Ms. Murray said, thank you.
By Ms. Murray.
Did there come a time when you stopped supporting Guo?
Yes.
Around when was that?
That's around June 2023.
Why did you stop supporting Guo around June of 2023?
Because there's a lot of the movement, the actions, I personally seen is wrong. I don't want to be part of it, so that's why I made the decision to stop.
Can you describe some of the actions that you're referring to?
Because there's also province within the farms and the Global Alliance. Especially the UK London Club. The leader was accused of misproper use the rule of law foundation monies. There's a lot of problems never get really solved. And I have personally reported a lot of the problems never got answer or solved.
Mr. Zhou, in total, how much money did you spend on the G series offering we've been discussing?
Total about $120,000.
And how did you pay for those investments or those costs of the G series?
Mr. Kamraju said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, sustained as to form.
Mr. Zhou, what was the source of the money that you spent on the G series offering?
Mr. Kumraju said, same objection.
The court said, step up please.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
The court said, so are you objecting on the basis that it isn't established that there was an offering?
Mr. Kumraju said, no, I'm objecting on the basis that the source of the money to pay for the offering is irrelevant.
The court said, overruled.
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
The witness said, yes, Your Honor.
The source of the money was from my personal earnings, and also I sold my properties, condominium I sold. And I also took out my wife's life insurance.
Why did you sell your condos, your personal real estate property?
Because at the time I need to cash the Himalaya exchange coin launch, but I invest into G Club. So at the time I don't have enough capital, but only thing I had was my condominium. I have to, and I sold it.
What about your wife's life insurance? Why, if at all, did you cash out the life insurance policy?
That money, she agreed to put it into the farm loan.
Mr. Zhou, how much profit, if any, did you make from the 120,000 or so that you spent on the G-series offerings?
Zero profit.
How much money in total did you lose, if any, through those offerings?
I lost about $30,000.
$30,000?
Or more.
At the time that you invested in the G-series offerings, did you believe that they would be profitable?
Yes.
At the time that you invested in the G-series offerings, did you believe that Miles Guo would personally pay for any losses that you sustained from those investments?
At that time I believed it.
Did Guo in fact repay you for the approximately $30,000 that you lost through the G-series investments?
No.
Ms. Murray said, may I have a moment, Your Honor? Nothing further.
The court said, cross-examination.
Mr. Kumraju said, yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Cross-examination.
By Mr. Kumraju.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Mr. Zhou.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Now you just testified that Mr. Guo has never repaid you the amount that you say that you lost, correct?
Correct.
You've never spoken with Mr. Guo, right?
I spoke to him.
You spoke to him about getting the money back.
No.
You've never asked him to get any money back, correct?
I mailed it to him.
You mailed it to Mr. Guo?
Yes.
Mr. Guo doesn't use email, correct?
I mailed it to.
Ms. Murray said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
You've never emailed Mr. Guo before, have you?
I didn't email to him.
Okay. So he's never responded to an email that you've sent, correct?
Never responded.
And he's never sent you personally an email, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now I want to start with the rule of law foundation. Do you remember testifying about that?
Yes.
And you testified that you first heard about it at a press conference in November 2018, correct?
Correct.
And your testimony was that you left that press conference with the impression that Mr. Guo was going to fund the Rule of Law Foundation to $100 million. Correct?
Correct.
And that's what the prosecutors asked you here today, right?
Yes.
Mr. Kumraju said, could we have Government Exhibit W1005V, please? It's in evidence, so we can publish it. If we can just play it a little bit.
Video played.
Mr. Kumraju said, okay. We can pause right there. Now they asked you about this clip earlier, correct?
Yes.
They asked you whether you had an understanding that Mr. Guo had made a representation about funding $100 million to the Rule of Law Foundation. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's not Mr. Guo, right?
That's not.
That's Steve Bannon, right?
Correct.
Steve Bannon looks nothing like Mr. Guo, right?
No.
Ms. Murray said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, "Overruled. Go ahead."
This is Steve Bannon talking, correct?
Correct.
So they asked you a question about representations Mr. Guo made, but they showed you a clip of Mr. Bannon. Correct?
Correct.
But then you answered that your expectation was Mr. Guo was going to fund the payment, right?
Correct.
Now this isn't the first time that you've seen this video clip, right?
Correct.
You've seen it when you prepared with them before, right?
I saw it at the live, when this press conference live.
Okay. We'll come back to that. But you've also seen it with the prosecutors, right?
Yes.
They've showed it to you before today, right?
Yes.
They showed it to you when you prepared your testimony with them, right?
Not prepared the testimony, but they showed it to me.
Okay. Well, you've met with the prosecutors multiple times, right?
Yes.
These prosecutors sitting at the table here, right?
Not all.
Some of them, right?
Yes.
Which ones?
4 of them.
Okay. So the 4 people sitting here at the front of the table?
Not the left 4 but.
Okay. Some set of those people, correct?
Correct.
And there was an FBI agent there, right?
No. I don't know.
There wasn't an FBI agent there the first time you met with the prosecutors?
I don't know if the FBI. I don't know.
Was there a translator there the first time you met with the prosecutors?
No.
There was no translator when you first met with them?
No translator.
So you've never used a translator to speak with the prosecutors, is that right?
I didn't use translators.
Okay. Now you testified that they showed you this clip during one of those meetings, right?
Correct.
How many meetings would you say you had with the prosecutors?
About 7.
About 7, right?
Yes.
So that's 7 times where you've met with the prosecutors to discuss the testimony that you gave today. Right?
Not discuss.
Okay. What did you talk about for 7 meetings then?
So I was being just asked the answer.
Okay. Well, what were they asking you about?
Asked related to the cases.
Right. They asked you the same questions they asked today, right?
Correct.
And you gave the answers, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And sometimes if they didn't like one of your answers, they asked a different question, right?
No.
So you're telling me during 7 meetings there was no point where they asked you a follow-up question. Is that your testimony?
They asked follow-up.
Ms. Murray said, "Objection."
The court said, "Sustained." Sustained as to what they were thinking.
Mr. Kamraju said, "Oh. My apologies, Your Honor."
The court said, "You may ask whether they asked follow-up questions."
Mr. Kamraju said, "Oh, sorry. I thought that's what I asked."
By Mr. Kamraju.
So over the course of 7 meetings, it's your testimony that the prosecutors never asked you a follow-up question.
Ms. Murray said, "Objection." Mischaracterizing the witness's testimony.
The court said, "Sustained."
Okay. Now you testified that you have seen this clip both during a meeting with the prosecutors but you also saw it live. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now this clip is not everything that even Mr. Bannon has to say at that press conference, right?
That's correct.
He gives much longer remarks, right?
Yes.
He takes questions from the press, right?
Yes.
Okay. He talks about efforts that Mr. Guo has made in support of the anti-CCP movement, right?
Yes.
He talks about Guo Media, correct?
Yes.
In fact, Mr. Bannon was even asked a question about whether the Trump administration was involved, right?
Ms. Murray said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
No.
You don't recall that?
Never asked.
Okay. So your testimony was Mr. Bannon was never asked that question, right?
Could you repeat that one more time, please?
Yeah. Was Mr. Bannon asked by a reporter whether the Trump administration would be involved with the Rule of Law Foundation?
No. Mr. Bannon never mentioned about Trump.
Okay. And he was never asked, right?
In that conference, no.
Okay. Now Mr. Guo did speak at that conference, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you talked about a few of the topics that he discussed during your direct testimony. Do you remember that?
Which topics?
Well, and forgive me if I get it wrong. But I believe one of the things you said was that he discussed investigating business deaths. Do you remember testifying about that?
I'm sorry. Not invest business stats. Investigate, Mr. Bannon said investigate mysterious Chinese businessmen's deaths.
Okay. What is that a reference to?
That reference to how this Rule of Law Foundation fund will be used.
Okay. Well. Mr. Bannon also talks about the fact that there had been an investigation into the death of a Chinese businessman. Correct?
Correct.
It was a chairman of a company called HNA, correct?
Ms. Murray said, "Objection."
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
Yes.
And Mr. Guo had previously predicted the death of the chairman of HNA, correct?
Ms. Murray said, "Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay and relevance."
The court said, "Sustained."
Mr. Kumraju said, "I'm not offering it for the truth, Your Honor."
The court said, "If you'll step up."
At the sidebar.
The court said, the question was, and Mr. Guo had previously predicted the death of.
Mr. Kumraju said, "Yes. I'm not offering it for the truth of the man's death, just simply that he predicted it. That he heard him say it."
The court said, "During the conference?"
Mr. Kumraju said, "No. Prior to the conference, Your Honor."
The court said, "Well, how is it relevant?"
Mr. Kumraju said, "Because the witness testified that Mr. Guo had revealed what he referred to as classified information, and that's one of the things that attracted the witness. I don't mean classified in the setting that American government uses it. I mean confidential information about the Chinese government, and that was what attracted him. I'm just following up. I don't intend to spend a long time on it. I have 2 more questions."
Ms. Murray said, "I don't see how it's not hearsay. I don't see how it's relevant."
The court said, "I just don't recall this testimony that you're referring to, that you're saying this witness said that one of the reasons he was attracted to Mr. Guo was because he mentioned the death of a businessman?"
Mr. Kumraju said, "No. He said that he knew that Mr. Guo had unknown details. He referred to it as classified information. I'm not calling it that. But he referred to secret information about Chinese government officials. And that's what Mr. Guo was revealing, that's one of the things that attracted him."
The court said, "I have to say I don't recall that particular testimony. Is that what he said?"
Ms. Murray said, "He indicated that it was one of the topics that Miles Guo had covered in his broadcast. But first of all, I think that the statement that Mr. Kumraju is referring to is not even covered in this broadcast. It's an out-of-court statement by Miles Guo. I also don't think that the alleged prediction of the death of a Chinese businessman falls within this broad category of potentially classified information about Chinese government officials. I just don't see the connection."
The court said, "So this prediction does not occur at the conference?"
Mr. Kumraju said, "No. Before the conference Mr. Guo predicts that it will happen. The death happens prior to the conference. Mr. Bannon then notes at the conference that one of the things that Mr. Guo has done is an investigation into the death of the businessman.
The court said, okay, I'm going to allow the question.
Mr. Kumraju said, thank you, Your Honor.
In open court.
The court said, overruled.
By Mr. Kumraju.
Sir, do you remember the question?
Could you please repeat it, please?
Yes. Mr. Kumraju said, I'm sorry to do this, but would the court reporter mind reading back the question, please?
Record read.
The court said, you may answer.
The witness said, yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
And Mr. Bannon discussed that at the press conference, correct?
Yes.
He talked about that Mr. Guo will send people to investigate the death, correct?
Ms. Murray said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
That part one don't remember.
Okay. What do you don't remember Mr. Bannon talking about Mr. Guo sending investigators?
Ms. Murray said, objection. Asked and answered, Your Honor.
The court said, sustained. Go ahead.
Now you testified on direct about your understanding of what the NFSC is, correct?
Correct.
And just remind us, what does NFSC stand for?
New Federal State of China.
All right. And it's comprised of individuals who would like to take down the Chinese Communist Party. Fair.
Yes.
And you were one of those people, right?
Yes.
And so you shared that goal, right?
Yes.
And now the NFSC, that's the new federal state of China, right? We're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
The NFSC was founded on June 4, 2020, correct?
Correct.
You watched the video about that founding, right?
Yes.
Mr. Guo was there, correct?
Correct.
He was in front of the Statue of Liberty, right?
Not in front of it. He was on his boat.
Okay. So the boat was in front of the Statue of Liberty, right?
Close to it.
And there were other people who appeared in the video, correct?
Yes.
One was a famous Chinese soccer star, right?
He appeared on stream, online.
Okay. So you could see him during the broadcast, right?
Yes.
Mr. Bannon was there also, right?
Correct.
And they were talking about the founding of this alternative government, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this is during the COVID pandemic, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now you talked a little bit about this on direct. But the idea is that the NFSC would be an alternative government to the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Yes.
And so you used the word on direct ecosystem. There were various businesses that comprise the ecosystem of the NFSC. Correct?
Yes.
So you talked about GTV, right? You testified about GTV. That was one of the companies that would be in the ecosystem?
Yes.
And G Clubs, that was another company that would be in the ecosystem, right?
Yes.
And the Himalaya Exchange, that was another company that would be in there, right?
Yes.
And each of these different components had a role to play as part of that ecosystem, correct?
The goal was the same.
They had a different purpose is what I'm trying to get at, right?
Purpose is all the same.
Okay. Well, let me try it this way. So GTV was a social media company, right?
Yes.
Himalaya Exchange was a cryptocurrency exchange, right?
Yes.
And they both do different things, right?
Correct.
But they were both intended to be part of the larger NFSC goal, right?
Ms. Murray said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
So in terms of purpose, GTV was intended to be sort of a social media platform that was devoid of CCP censorship, correct?
Yes.
And G Clubs was a way for NFSC members to associate with each other, correct?
No. It's for investments.
It's for investments.
Yes.
Didn't you testify on direct that you were going to get a passport as part of G Clubs, right?
Yes.
And that passport was going to be an NFSC passport, right?
Yes.
Okay. So G Clubs was for NFSC members, among other reasons, to associate with each other, correct?
Ms. Murray said, "Objection, Your Honor." Asked and answered.
The court said, "I'm going to allow the question."
Not to socialize with other members, because each investor is individually. We don't know their informations.
So you joined G Clubs, right?
Yes.
Okay. When you joined G Clubs, were you proud of joining G Clubs?
Yes.
Okay. You were showing your commitment to the NFSC. That was one of the reasons why you bought a G Clubs membership, right?
I want to get stock and also get a passport, which was promised.
Okay. I didn't ask you what was promised. I just asked why you did it, right?
Ms. Murray said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, "So don't testify."
Okay. You mentioned that you wanted to get a passport, right?
Yes.
And that was the NFSC passport, right?
Yes.
All right. You also testified about the farm loans, right?
Yes.
And the farm loans were intended to provide funding for the farm's work, right?
That was the fund. What will be used for?
Right. And you testified on direct, you said it would be used for the working capital of the farms. Right?
Correct.
So that's the farm's business, right?
Farm can use it as operation capitals.
Okay. So the farm has discretion to use it on its operations, right?
Yes.
So if the farm decides they want to spend it on this, they can spend it on this. If they want to spend it on that, they can spend it on that, right?
There's also restriction.
Okay. And that restriction was found in the loan agreement, is that right?
I don't remember that.
Okay. So you don't remember where this restriction is located, right?
Where located, I don't remember.
Okay. Now I believe you lived in China until 1998, correct?
Correct.
And the political goals of the NFSC. Is it fair to say they're easier to support in the United States than in China?
Yes.
Here you had the choice to spend your money on those products, right?
On which products?
Well, just take G Clubs, right? That was your choice, you could spend on it, right?
Yes.
Like there was no government agency that stopped you from spending on it, right?
Correct.
And like this hat that you testified about, this was your choice, right? You could buy this hat if you wanted to, right?
Yes.
And the whistle that you talked about, your choice, right?
But all the purchases was also towards to grow the G fashions as one of the investments. I treated it as not just purely purchase items but to support the growth together.
Okay. To support the growth of the company, right?
As the shareholders.
Okay. But you weren't actually a shareholder in G Fashion, right?
No. Miles Guo mentioned our investment will including G Fashion stocks.
Continued on next page. By Mr. Kumraju.
You never had a share of G Fashion shares, correct, sir?
I don't have the shares.
Okay. You have no idea how many shares you even think you were promised, right?
Promised $1 per shares.
Okay. So $1 for everything you spent on G Fashion?
Not spend. It was G Fashion was in the future. The G Fashion's gross was towards to the G Series investments.
Okay. So going back to my original question though, that was your choice to spend on that, right?
Ms. Murray said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Yes.
Now, sir, you testified on direct you're in the real estate business, is that right?
Yes.
And you've been in the real estate business for more than 10 years, right?
Correct.
So you're pretty experienced in the business, right?
Yes.
Your company is called East West Luxury Group, is that right?
No, that's my small group.
I'm sorry.
That's my inner group.
That's your inner group. Okay. What's the name of your company? I'm sorry.
United Realty Group.
And do you specialize in any particular kind of property?
Yes.
What's that?
Residential.
Okay. Do you have a particular type of clientele?
What you mean by?
Ms. Murray said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by particular?
Well, for example, do you specialize in high-end residential properties?
Ms. Murray said, objection, Your Honor. 402, 403.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
I just the residential. I don't consider particular. If it's a high-end or it's low-income or it's affordable housing.
Okay. So you run the gamut, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you advise your clients in connection with those transactions, right?
I'm sorry, which transactions?
Just your real estate business, right?
I'm only show the houses, provide informations on the houses. But I don't control monies or receive the monies.
No. Sir, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not asking you if you receive the money or don't receive the money. All I'm asking is you advise your clients in connection with the purchase of their homes, right?
Yes.
Okay. And part of that advice is to tell them to pay attention to the deal they're entering into, right?
Correct.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, objection. Sidebar.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor. The court previously ruled that you can't get into the details of the decisions that people made in the investments. It's veering into negligence, it's prejudicial, it's not relevant, this line of questioning. And it's, I think, over the line of and the argument that there was negligence associated with the investments that this witness testified to.
Mr. Kumraju said, I do not intend at all to argue negligence. The determination, 1, it goes to materiality, which the government has to prove. 2, Your Honor also said that as part of materiality, we were allowed to inquire into the sophistication of the potential investor's particular trades that might make that a reasonable investor. I'm not arguing that he should have done this or he should have done that. I'm just saying that part of materiality turns on what representations you're focused on. And sophistication is something that Your Honor has already explicitly said is fair game.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, these questions aren't going to sophistication of him as an investor, it's victim blaming. Asking him whether he advised clients in the course of his real estate transactions and whether those clients were high-end individuals. I don't see how that is remotely relevant to this individual's understanding of what the investment opportunities were or his motivation for investing in them.
The court said, so he's asked whether he advises the client to.
Mr. Kumraju said, pay attention.
The court said, pay attention to the details.
Ms. Shrofa said, read a contract of sale.
Mr. Finkel said, that's not appropriate. This is a fraud case. There's no reliance defense. You can't say to a victim of fraud, you should have read all these details, sir. This is victim blaming through another word. They are using materiality. And the jury is going to draw the wrong conclusion. It's a 403 problem.
Mr. Kumraju said, Your Honor is going to instruct the jury as to the elements of the offense. I'm sure the government will ask as to that instruction. Reliance is not relevant. I'm not sure I see.
The court said, well, I think that you're trying to get him to say that I advise my clients to use good judgment. And the implication is that he didn't follow his own advice.
Mr. Kumraju said, no, Your Honor. What I'm eventually going to set up is to the extent that he did not read documents when entering into these investments. Is because the information in those documents was not material to him. Which is directly as a joinder to the government's allegations of specific recommendations in those documents are material. It didn't matter to him what's in the farm loan agreement, to enter into the farm loan agreement. Then how it can be material?
The court said, did he actually discuss the specifics of agreements?
Mr. Kumraju said, he also told the FBI that he didn't read them.
The court said, but he testified today about the specific agreements, so I don't think you can argue that he said that he did not rely on the agreements at all.
Mr. Kumraju said, I'm allowed to impeach him on that, Your Honor.
The court said, well, I'm saying you can't say he didn't testify about examining the agreements.
Mr. Kumraju said, no, no, no. You're right, Your Honor. What I'm saying is I'm allowed to impeach that testimony to suggest that he didn't read those.
The court said, you can challenge him on that. What I'm saying is you can't imply that he did not say today that he read the agreements.
Mr. Kumraju said, no, absolutely, Your Honor. I'm not intending.
The court said, so I am going to sustain the objection at this point because I do think that you're going down that road of the blaming of the victim.
Mr. Kumraju said, okay, Your Honor.
Mr. Finkel said, thank you.
In open court.
The court said, sustained.
By Mr. Kumraju.
Now, you testified on direct that you were interested in investing in GTV, correct?
Yes.
And you understood that the purpose of GTV was to be a social media platform, right?
Yes.
And that it was to broadcast material that was critical of the Chinese government, right?
Yes.
So that was one of the goals that the movement had, was to set up a social media network like that. Right?
For all people to use, yes.
Right. And the NFSC was actually, the public announcement of the NFSC was actually just 2 days after the GTV private placement closed. Correct?
Yes.
Now, you testified that you were hoping to earn a profit on GTV, right?
I'm sorry?
You testified that you were hoping to earn a profit on GTV, correct?
Yes.
But you understood it was a risky business, right?
Yeah. Miles Moore mentioned it, investment has risk.
Mr. Guo said investment has risk, right?
Also he made a guarantee.
Well, I asked you if he said that it.
Ms. Murray said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, sustained. Continue your questions.
Now, you testified that Mr. Guo told people who wanted to make an investment less than $100,000 that they had to contact Sarah Wei, right?
At the time, yes.
At the time. What do you mean by that?
Because the first announcement he mentioned who liked to invest, he didn't mention that.
Okay. So there came a point at which Mr. Guo said, if you want to invest less than $100,000, you should go to Ms. Wei, right?
He didn't mention 100,000, less 100,000. He mentioned for other people that don't have that much can contact other farm leaders to invest. He will not let the followers left behind.
He didn't want the followers to be left behind, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So your testimony is he didn't mention $100,000, he just said smaller investments go to your farm leaders. Is that right?
No. He mentioned 100,000 is 2 tiers, 100,000 for a certain limited headcounts. It was 2,000 headcounts.
Okay. So there were 2,000 head counts, to use your word, for people who wanted to invest $100,000 or more, right?
That's a minimum.
Right. So $100,000 or more, right?
Correct.
And then if you wanted to invest less than $100,000, he told you to go talk to people in the farms. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that was the only dividing line, right? It was more than $100,000 or less than $100,000, right?
Yes.
And you personally decided that you wanted to invest less than $100,000, right?
Not decide, just I don't have $100,000 at the time.
Okay. Fair enough. You didn't have the $100,000, so you ended up investing less, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, you testified on direct that you watched a broadcast that Mr. Guo did on April 21, 2020. Right?
April 20th.
This is the one that's announcing the GTV private placement, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you watched that, right?
Yes.
Okay. You watched the whole thing.
Yes.
Mr. Kumraju said, could we bring up Government Exhibit GXC26T and go to page 1, please? The prosecutors, when they asked you about this, they only showed you one clip from the...
The court said, "One moment please. It seems that one of our jurors, number 12, does not have the image on the screen."
Mr. Kumraju said, I think it may be a problem with that one screen, Your Honor.
The court said, "Can you look onto juror number 11's screen? Juror number 12, are you able to look at juror number 11's screen? Okay. Go ahead please."
Mr. Kumraju said, maybe we can blow up the paragraph. That's great. Thank you. Is that better? Okay.
By Mr. Kumraju.
Now, on direct, the prosecutors asked you about one clip from this broadcast, correct?
Yes.
They didn't show you the whole broadcast to testify about, right?
Correct.
So you see here where it says, this video is just a brief introduction. Do you see that?
I saw the English text, yes.
Could you read that, please, the highlighted portion?
This video is just a brief introduction to friends and fellow fighters who have the intention to invest in GTV so that you can understand the documents to be signed in the investment and during investment, as well as some basic procedures.
Mr. Kumraju said, okay. Can we go to page 5, please? Do you see the highlighted portion here?
Yes.
Could you read that, please?
Within 24 hours after you receive this video, you will receive the following documents from the law firm about the so-called private equity of GTV.
Mr. Kumraju said, okay. Could we go to page 2, please? Do you see the highlighted section here?
Yes.
Could you read that, please?
Please carefully read through all the documents to be signed for investment.
Okay. Mr. Kumraju said, could we go to page 16, please? Could you read that highlighted portion, please?
I just would like to make a brief explanation. But I will stress this one more time, please be sure to read the prospectus, subscription letter, shareholder agreement, and confidentiality agreement that are sent to you. Those will prevail.
Okay. So on repeated instances during the April 20th broadcast, Mr. Guo urged listeners to read the documents, correct?
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, same objection that we raised at sidebar.
The court said, the objection is sustained. Move on.
Do you know what he means when he says, prospectus?
He didn't speak that broadcast in English, his original words were in Chinese.
Mr. Kumraju said, I think we can take it down. We have the Chinese next to it. That's helpful. Your Honor, I'm sorry. Could we have a 20-second sidebar?
The court said yes.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
Mr. Kumraju said, just before I continue, I just want to make sure I understand. Am I not permitted to ask him if he's read the prospectus?
The court said, I want to first hear the objection of the prosecution.
Mr. Kamraju said, okay.
Ms. Murray said, that question is not objectionable. But the questions that Mr. Kamraju has been asking are going again to kind of victim blaming and picking apart very specific details about what this victim did or didn't do in a way that is prejudicial. Is intended to kind of muddy the waters for this victim. If he wants to ask if he read the prospectus, he can ask if he read the prospectus.
Mr. Kamraju said, all I elicited was that Mr. Guo directed investors to the prospectus where there is information surrounding the representations that the government is relying on. I want to be able to ask him if he read the prospectus. If he didn't, he didn't. That's what the entire line of questioning before was when I showed him the various parts. Was that Mr. Guo is directing them to the document.
The court said, so it's not a don't you think you should have done that, you're not going to follow up with that.
Mr. Kamraju said, I don't intend to ask him, shouldn't you have read it, no.
The court said, just did you. That's it. And then you're done with that line of questioning?
Mr. Kamraju said, I mean, if he says yes, he read it, then I'm going to show him the document. I'm going to ask about specific representations about the document.
The court said, see, that's the problem. You can't go to those representations.
Mr. Kamraju said, actually, Your Honor. Your Honor ruled in a motion in limine under the Weaver case that we are allowed to show different representations in the PPM to go to materiality. The government explicitly argued that it only went to reliance. They cited Weaver. Weaver, in fact, says the disclaimers are relevant to the idea of materiality. So if you read the disclaimers, then I'm allowed to elicit them. Otherwise, I don't know how to elicit that other than through a witness who read the document.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, the representations that were made weren't only contained within the document. There is the broadcasts, there are other statements that he made. So to the extent that they want to inquire and find out what caused the witness to invest or what induced him to invest, they can ask that question without tying it to the language of the prospectus and going to this line of questioning. Then with respect to the specific question, did he read the prospectus, we don't object to that question. But it's the 20 questions that have led up to it and then the questions that would follow.
The court said, if he answers yes, then what questions do you feel are appropriate?
Ms. Murray said, I think it would be questions regarding the materiality of, I believe this is where Mr. Kamraju is going. The materiality of the guarantee that Guo made that he would personally guarantee any losses. If the line of questioning is, here's what was stated in the prospectus. Were Guo's statements that he would personally guarantee your money? Were those immaterial to your decision to invest because it's not listed in the prospectus anywhere? I don't think that's.
Mr. Kamraju said, well, first of all, I will note that the indictment alleges that the misrepresentation related to the securities fraud count and the wire fraud count related to GTV to be statements in the prospectus. So the idea that he made statements elsewhere that affected that, that's fine. They can argue that. But there's no universe in which the prospectus statements are not relevant. And the information surrounding those representations are not relevant unless they're dropping the count. Which I don't think they are.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, this is not the only victim who invested in the GTV offering. It's very clear that what they're trying to do is back into the sophistication. And a topic that Your Honor already ruled doesn't come in through this. Again, if they want to ask.
The court said, if you're relying on the representations in the indictment, how is it that it would not be proper to ask the witness about these representations mentioned in the indictment?
Ms. Murray said, well, I think first we would establish whether he read the prospectus.
Mr. Kamraju said, sure. I'm going to do that.
The court said yes, but if he answers yes, that's where I'm asking.
Ms. Murray said, if he answers yes. It's fair game to ask questions about certain of the language in the prospectus and determine whether he had read it at the time. But what we're concerned about is kind of the slippery slope of then going into the sophistication and victim blaming.
The court said, well, did you read it? Let's say he says yes. Then the next question is, did you consider the risk that was set out in the prospectus?
Mr. Finkel said, "One way that Your Honor might want to contend with this, and I know it's been done in other fraud cases, is through a limiting instruction, which is simply telling the jury that whether the witness or the victims were sophisticated or not, were aware of risks that they avoided or relied on various disclaimers or not is not what's at issue here. The questions are being asked only for the purpose of assessing whether the representations that the witness testified about. Here, the representations about the guarantee and the use of GT funds, whether those are material. I have seen that done in other fraud cases."
The court said, "Okay, we're going to take a pause and I want you to draft this instruction."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "I'll just note, Your Honor, that everything he just said is a proper subject of a jury instruction. Not a limiting instruction in the middle of testimony."
The court said, "I don't know that I agree with that."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Well, Your Honor, I'm not sure. First of all, Your Honor did say that we can acquire the sophistication of the investors because it goes into the materiality analysis. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. I get the idea that we can't argue that the victims are negligent or they should have done more. We're not precluded from arguing or eliciting testimony that these are sophisticated people. That's black-letter Second Circuit law. That's the Litvak case. The Litvak case says sophistication of the investors plays into it."
Mr. Finkel said, "That's a civil case."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "No, it's US v. Litvak. So I don't, because you have to judge the reasonable investor standard by the investors who are in the market. That's what the law is. So that's one point. 2. I don't know how you get away from determining the materiality of any individual statement taken outside of the context of the larger document. There's no principle of law that supports that. If a guy says he read not this witness, but generally. If a person says they read a document, and document one section of the document says this is how we might use the money, and the other section of the document says those are just examples of how we use the money, it goes to the materiality analysis, Your Honor."
Mr. Finkel said, "Your Honor, the Weaver case, which we briefed and which Your Honor ruled on directly addresses this. And it prevents defense counsel from eliciting this sort of testimony. What happened in Weaver, if I recall correctly, was essentially the defendant, the fraudster, was saying to victims, 'You're going to make millions of dollars.' All that kind of stuff, right? Then, they would receive documents that would say something to the effect of, 'Don't listen to anything I just said.' A disclaimer. And so the defense wanted to put in a disclaimer to say, 'Look, you should have looked at that disclaimer, victim. You should have known, victim, that you shouldn't have listened to the guy, the defendant, as to what he said.' Second Circuit said you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because fraud in a criminal context, there's no reliance on it. There's an objective reasonable standard which the jury will assess. But you can't. Defense counsel is asking questions about this all came about because they are asking questions about, are you a good real estate broker? Do you point your clients to specific details in the contracts? Do you look over things? That goes to whether or not they were assessing disclaimers. That's not the issue. The issue is whether Guo's statements made in these broadcasts were lies, and whether, based on those lies, they were material to the victims, and so they sent money to Guo, and they did."
The court said, "What does the prospectus say?"
Mr. Finkel said, "The prospectus says a number of things. One of the things that I think defense counsel is referring to with respect to the indictment is how the money would be used. For example, the prospectus doesn't say that the money would be sent to a hedge fund in the name of Mr. Guo's son. It says that the money would be used to essentially invest in GTV. There is no guarantee in the prospectus. And I think that's kind of what defense counsel is getting at, which is exactly on all fours with the Weaver case. Because in the Weaver case, again, the defendant was saying things that victims relied on, and were the reasons why the victim invested, and then later got disclaimers. And so the Second Circuit sorry. Your Honor.
The court said, but do these documents contain disclaimers?
Mr. Finkel said, the prospectus?
The court said yes.
Mr. Finkel said, I believe there are some disclaimers in that document, yes, Your Honor.
The court said, like what?
Mr. Kamaraju said, like I'll give you an example. There's a chart that they rely on that they put into the indictment that said these are the contemplated use of proceeds. And then there's language that says this list is illustrative, right, which means it's examples, right. I'm allowed to elicit that to materiality. I'll just say one point on the Weaver case, Your Honor. Respectfully. You've already addressed this and you've already noted that the government's description of Weaver is precisely wrong. Because what they said in Weaver is that while there is no reliance element and the defense cannot make a reliance argument, they can point to those disclaimers for purposes of the materiality analysis. Which is what Your Honor has already found. So I don't know why we're revisiting the context in Weaver.
Mr. Finkel said, and that's why to obviate any potential juror confusion, a limiting instruction would be appropriate. And we'll draft one for the court's consideration.
The court said, all right, so that's what you'll do. You'll draft and we'll pause.
Mr. Finkel said, thank you.
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, members of the jury, we're going to take a brief pause. Remember that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves, or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. I'll call you back shortly.
Jury not present.
The court said, you can step down. Don't discuss the testimony.
The witness said, sure, Your Honor. Witness not present.
The court said, please be seated.
Recess.
The court said, please be seated. Are the documents in evidence? The prospectus the other?
Mr. Kamaraju said, I don't believe so, Your Honor, no.
The court said, they are not in evidence. Okay, so on the issue of materiality, it is certainly material whether or not the witness read the documents. But where you cannot go is into a question like, shouldn't you have heeded the warnings?
Mr. Kamaraju said, understood, Your Honor. I don't intend to ask any question like that.
The court said, the proposed instruction is, when considering witness testimony, please note that negligence, carelessness, or gullibility on the part of the victims is no defense to a charge of fraud.
Mr. Kamaraju said, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I should have noted this. If you're going to use the word victims, we would at least ask you use the word alleged victims.
The court said, I have not even stated whether I'm going to use the instruction.
Mr. Kamaraju said, no, I know, Your Honor, and I apologize for jumping in. When I heard you read it again, it occurred to me that I missed that.
The court said, clearly if I were to read the instruction, I would use witness instead of victims. But why is it necessary to give this instruction now as opposed to when I'm instructing the jury at the end of the case?
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, it's a correct statement of law, and it absolves the jury from any confusion. And I think the jury would reasonably be confused. They might be thinking, I wouldn't have invested in this. I would have known that this didn't make any sense. I would have known to read the disclaimer and look at all the language. And that's what laypeople who don't understand the fraud law that we all do would expect. So this instruction, which is a correct statement of law, resolves that issue. And I think appropriately contextualizes the line of questioning that defense counsel has advanced.
Mr. Kamaraju said, well, Your Honor.
Mr. Finkel said, it's also a long trial.
Mr. Kamaraju said, well, it is a long trial. So Your Honor is going to instruct the jury that they should begin deliberations at the close of all evidence. You're going to instruct them, I presume, as to the proper elements of the law. And so when they are considering this witness's testimony, as long as anybody else They will have the appropriate law to guide them. There's no need to preview government arguments about the law to the jury now, when this is not a question. For example, of like is evidence being offered for this purpose or this purpose. It ultimately goes to the elements of the offense. And Your Honor can address it at the time that you address all the other elements of the offense. Which is when you instruct the jury as to the law, at the close of evidence.
Mr. Finkel said, it exactly is the kind of issue where the evidence is being offered for a particular purpose. It's being offered for the purpose of materiality. And a jury doesn't know what all of this means. So what Your Honor is doing is delivering to them a correct statement of law so they can understand the evidence as they sit through the trial. As I understand, looking back on the briefing on this issue, defense counsel doesn't object generally to the concept that negligence is not a defense. And so we think Your Honor instructing the jury of that is appropriate so they understand how to use the evidence that defense counsel is seeking to adduce.
The court said, so I agree with Mr. Kamraju that it is not appropriate to give the instruction at this time. But I want to talk about what you can and cannot ask. You can ask whether he has read those documents. If you get a no, it stops there. The inquiry stops there. There's no shouldn't you have.
Mr. Kamraju said, 100%, Your Honor. I do not intend if he says no. I'm not going to ask him more questions about the document or should he have read it or shouldn't he have read it.
The court said, now if he says yes, then you can ask. Did you consider the statements made in those documents? But you can't go on and then say, well, shouldn't you have heeded that warning?
Mr. Kamraju said, I do not intend and the questions that Your Honor is formulating. Like, shouldn't you have, I have no intention, that was not, I don't think I've asked one of those questions. But that was not my intention.
The court said, wouldn't a reasonable person have? Wouldn't you advise your client to? Nothing like that.
Mr. Kamraju said, okay, Your Honor.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, if I may. And I understand the court's ruling. The problem is a victim saying that they didn't read the documents. The implication that's left for the jury is potentially, well, they should have. And that's not the correct statement of how that's not a correct statement of law as to how this evidence should be considered.
The court said, people don't even read the instructions on their iPhones.
Mr. Finkel said, I know.
The court said, and so I think that average jurors would not necessarily have the expectation that someone would read a prospectus.
Mr. Finkel said, so, Your Honor, we don't know what the jury is thinking obviously. And so the government's request is just that the jury be instructed as to the law so they know how to contextualize this evidence. That's all.
The court said, I think an instruction on this discrete aspect of the law, this particular defense or lack of a defense, is drawing attention to or supporting an argument of the government instead of truly clarifying. So let's bring the witness back and the jurors back.
Mr. Kamraju said, Your Honor, I'm sorry, can I just have one last verification?
The court said yes.
Mr. Kamraju said, if he says yes and I ask him, did you consider statements in the prospectus? Am I allowed to point him to particular statements in the prospectus?
The court said yes.
Mr. Kamraju said, okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
The court said, to the extent that he said he read them, you may point him to those particular statements.
Mr. Kamraju said, okay. So I.
The court said, and you may ask if you've considered them.
Mr. Kamraju said, I can put up a statement and say, did you read this?
The court said yes.
Mr. Kamraju said, and if he says yes, I can say, did you consider it? And if he says no, move on.
The court said right. But if he says, I did not read the prospectus, then you cannot bring up those.
Mr. Kamraju said, understood.
The court said yes. Anything further, Mr. Finkel?
Mr. Finkel said, no, Your Honor. Rising because I think the jury is about to enter.
The court said, okay.
Jury present.
The court said, would you have the witness return to the stand, please?
Witness present.
The court said, "Remember, sir, that you're still under oath. And please be seated. And you may continue the cross-examination."
Mr. Kamraju said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
By Mr. Kamraju.
Sir, I think when we broke, we were discussing a document called the prospectus. Do you remember that?
Which document? Sorry.
I think we referred to it as the prospectus. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Prior to sending money to VOG, did you read the prospectus?
I never received that.
So you never received a copy of the prospectus. Okay. Thank you. Now, you testified on direct, well. I'm sorry. Mr. Kamraju said, "Could we pull up Government Exhibit GXC 63T, please, June 2, 2020 video translation. Could we go to page 9? Please. I believe you testified about some part of this." Mr. Kamraju said, "But if we could blow up the box on the right that starts, we had an initial valuation of 200 million.
Yes, I see that.
See that? All right. And you see where it says, the private placement exceeded the highest expectations and raised $350 million, correct?
Yes.
So the private placement, in fact, raised more money than was originally being sought, right?
That was part of VOG, yes.
Well, the VOG money you testified was separate, right?
No, is part of this. Private placement.
So the $350 million that's being referred to, that's part of VOG, is part of that?
No.
Okay. It's separate, right?
Yes.
Mr. Kamraju said, okay. And if we can go down on, just a little bit further down in that box. No, I'm sorry. If you could just, the sentence that starts, this is up to now this figure and through, yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay. So you see it says, let's say 350 million. 350 million does not include the 117 million from VOG, right? See that?
The 350 doesn't include the 117, that's correct.
Right. The 117 million, which is coming in through VOG, is separate from the 350 million that was raised as part of the private placement, right?
No, it's not separate from the private placement, it was included in the private placement. It's just separate fund, 350.
Well, you testified on direct that there were a certain number of seats, right?
Yes.
There were 2,000 seats, right?
That was previously Miles mentioned it, yes.
Well, I'm asking what your understanding was, sir.
When was introduced it to us as including me? Miles Guo mentioned it private placement and also public placement, the differences, then he explained it. Private placement, if there were limitations, their seats, 2,000 seats. Then if it exceeds that limitations, then it will be kind of different placement.
Okay. So the private placement could have had 2,000 seats. Can I just ask you? When you say, seats, what do you mean?
His original words translate to English called long chair o chair, ph.
Well, sir, I'm sorry, I'm not asking for a translation. I'm just asking what your understanding of the word seat is when you use it.
My understanding is called long position.
Your understanding is it's a long position.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. What does that mean?
That's a financial term for investment. People before the private investments. Those are people will invest and hold their stocks for certain periods.
Okay. So the seats are people who buy and hold their stock for a certain period?
Yeah. And also they are considered as the first investors.
Okay. So they are the first set of investors, right?
Correct.
And there were 2,000 of seats available in the private placement, correct?
Correct.
And then there was a separate set of money that came in related to VOG, right?
The separate money, the VOG, was for the people's investment that was under certain amounts.
I'm sorry, sir, but that wasn't my question, right? My question is the money that came in through VOG is separate from the money that you're talking about that comes in through the seats? Right?
That I don't know.
Okay. But you invested through VOG, that was your understanding, right?
Correct.
And you testified that you got the wire information from Sarah Wei, is that right?
That's correct.
But you never directly corresponded with Sarah Wei, right?
I messaged her, she replied.
With the wire information?
Yes. So the emails.
Now, we talked about how you had met with prosecutors before, right?
Yes.
Do you remember telling the prosecutors that you never had direct communication with Ms. Wei?
I told them I contacted Sarah Wei, yes.
I'm sorry.
I told them I contacted Sarah Wei direct.
Okay. So there was somebody taking notes during that interview, right?
I didn't take notes.
I said there was somebody taking notes, right?
I didn't see who was taking notes.
I'm not asking if you saw who, I'm asking did you see somebody taking notes, sir?
I don't know.
Mr. Kamraju said, all right. Can we bring up Government Exhibit GXVO80, please? I believe this is in evidence. So we can publish it. And can we just blow up that first paragraph? Okay. And do you see there's a name there, Li Hong Wei La friends? It's in the fourth line down. Mr. Kamraju said, there you go. Thank you, sir. Do you see that?
Yes.
That's Sarah Wei, right?
That's her legal name, right?
Do you recognize this? This is the limited purpose agency agreement that you signed with Ms. Wei. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this is in connection with your GTV investment?
Correct.
Mr. Kamraju said, okay. The government offers GX, I'm sorry, the government. Apologies, Your Honor. The defense, long afternoon already. The defense offers GXVO 80 into evidence.
The court said, no objection?
Ms. Murray said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit VO80 received in evidence.
Mr. Kamraju said, sorry about that.
By Mr. Kamraju.
So just to clear it up, the name that's highlighted, that's Sarah Wei, correct?
Correct.
And through this agreement you're designating Ms. Wei to be your agent for purposes of buying GTV shares. Correct?
Correct.
You don't designate Mr. Guo for those purposes, right?
No.
You don't have any contract designating any authority to Mr. Guo over your purchases, right?
Not with him, no.
I was just asking about him. Not with him, right?
Not with him.
You don't have a farm loan agreement with Mr. Guo, right?
No.
You don't have a G Clubs agreement with Mr. Guo, right?
I never receive a G Club agreement.
Okay. So then you don't have one with him, right?
No.
You don't have an agreement to buy H coin with Mr. Guo, right?
No.
Okay. And you, in fact, never spoke directly with Mr. Guo about buying H coin, right?
No.
You never spoke directly with Mr. Guo about buying G Clubs, right?
No.
You never spoke directly with Mr. Guo about buying GTV shares, right?
No.
Now, there comes a point when there's a disagreement between Mr. Guo and Ms. Wei, correct?
I'm not sure if it's a disagreement, words would be accurate.
You understood that they had a bit of a falling out, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Guo made public statements about Ms. Wei, correct?
Yes.
He encouraged supporters to contact law enforcement about Ms. Wei, right?
Ms. Murray said, "Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay."
The court said, "If you'll step up."
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, "So why is it that these statements could come in?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Well, I'm not offering them for their truth at all. I'm offering them for the fact that he said them and the fact that he's inviting scrutiny from law enforcement and public law filings. Which is inconsistent with the idea that he had a guilty intent at the time. If he was trying to hide what he was doing, he wouldn't have told people to bring the FBI in. They are not being offered for their truth, they're just being offered for the fact that he's inviting that to happen."
The court said, "What was it that he said about Ms. Wei?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "He said a number of things about Ms. Wei. But what I have in the 3500 material is that he asked supporters to contact law enforcement, including the FBI, about what Ms. Wei had done."
The court said, "What was it that he claimed she did?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Stolen money from the farm loan program."
Ms. Murray said, "Your Honor, the defendant is welcome to testify about that. We can't, it's just not permissible to backdoor in the defendant's statements through this manner about what he may or may not have said to people about Ms. Wei."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "It has to be offered for the truth to be hearsay. That's foundational. We're not offering it for the truth."
The court said, "What is it that if the witness is aware that the statement was made, how is it relevant to his testimony?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Well, he testified about the fact that he gave his money to Sarah Wei so that Sarah Wei would make a GTV investment on his behalf. He just testified he had an agency agreement with Ms. Wei to do that for him. Mr. Guo and many other people think that Sarah Wei, who, our understanding is going to be a witness at this trial, stole the money. And my point simply is that if a person who's involved in a fraud or is alleged to be involved in a fraud says, 'Hey, FBI, come look at what I'm doing,' that suggests that they don't have a guilty conscience, Your Honor. And much of their."
The court said, "I don't understand why it is this witness has to testify about having heard that statement."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Because he told the prosecutors about it, Your Honor. It's not as if I'm planning."
The court said, "But what is the purpose? How is it relevant? Did he act upon the statement?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "He did actually act upon the statement."
The court said, "How so?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "He filed complaints with various local law enforcement agencies."
The court said, "And how is it relevant to whether or not your client is guilty?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Whether he filed them, I'm not arguing that is relevant. What I'm arguing is the fact that Mr. Guo is asking people to look at what's happening here is the exact opposite of consciousness of guilt."
The court said, "Right. But you're just trying to get that statement in through this witness. The objection is sustained."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Can I ask for the basis, Your Honor? Is it relevance or is it hearsay?"
The court said, "There's no question that it's hearsay."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "I don't mean to argue with the court. I just want to understand how it's being offered for the truth."
The court said, "You want to get the statement in to show that your client had an adverse relationship with Ms. Wei."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "No. I'm asking to get the statement in to show that my client is not afraid of the FBI looking at what he was doing."
Ms. Shrofa said, "It's a state of mind."
The court said, "Examining what she was doing."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "No. Because their allegation is that Ms. Wei is a part and parcel of the GTV conspiracy."
The court said, "Okay. So I don't know what her role is."
Ms. Murray said, "So Ms. Wei operated a company. She was one of the farm leaders. And that particular farm was used to aggregate non-accredited investors' money. So Miles Guo made it available in violation of securities law to people who had less than $100,000. And he said, 'Why don't you go to Ms. Wei, and she'll aggregate all of your money. And it will look like a legitimate investment from voice of Guo that's above the threshold.' So another way to kind of evaded the securities regulations. We agree with Your Honor, this is not the witness to bring in what Mr. Kumraju is trying to bring in.
Mr. Kumraju said, but I still don't understand. If their allegation is that Ms. Wei was part of conduct that they're alleging is criminal on behalf of Mr. Guo, the statement is not being offered for the truth, and the defense argument is that he's asking from sunlight to be put on the conduct, which is inconsistent.
The court said, but why does it come in through this witness?
Mr. Kumraju said, I'm not sure why it can't come in through this witness, Your Honor. I understand that there are other witnesses that, indiscernible, may prefer that it comes through the defendant. But I'm not aware of an evidentiary objection that says it can't come in through this witness as opposed to some other witness.
Ms. Shrofa said, or through multiple witnesses. That's not an evidentiary objection.
Ms. Murray said, Your Honor, it's our view the court has ruled on this matter. I understand Mr. Kumraju is just continuing to litigate it. But we agree with your ruling on this. The objection should be sustained. We should move on.
The court said, I'm going to sustain the objection.
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, sustained. Go ahead.
By Mr. Kumraju.
Now, sir, you testified before about the Himalaya farms, correct?
Yes.
And there's a structure to those farms, right?
Yes.
There are different positions within the farms, right?
Correct.
So there's a farm leader, right?
Yes.
And then the farm leader may have others who sort of assist them, correct?
Correct.
Did you have a position in any farm, sir?
My position was OBS streamer for the farm.
OBS streamer for the farm.
Yes.
Okay. What does OBS stand for?
It's a software platform name. It's open software. Allow you to connect your computer and the cameras, broadcast to designated location, like YouTube, push it out to it. Or push it to other sources.
Okay. And then above the farms comes the alliance, right?
Yes.
So all the farm leaders are part of the alliance, that's your understanding, right?
Yes.
And so they set policy for the farms, is that your understanding?
Yes.
And then above them is something called the Iron Blood Group, is that right?
No, not above.
Okay. I'm sorry. You explain it to me. I may have it wrong.
Iron Blood Group was launched by Guo. There were 3 members at the beginning. Eventually expanded to a larger group. All the member was selected by Guo.
Okay. But the group had some authority, right?
They have their roles.
Sir, I'm not trying to trick you. But didn't you tell the prosecutors that the Iron Blood Group had full authority to run the farms?
Not run the farm.
Okay. So what kind of authority did they have over the farm, sir?
Iron Blood member will act as higher management group to managing the farm leaders. And also they have the designated roles.
Okay. So they each may have designated roles within the Iron Blood Group, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So one of the members of the Iron Blood Group was called Mulan, right?
Yes.
Mulan is not her real name, right?
No.
What's her real name?
Leah.
And Ms. Wei was a member of the Iron Blood Group at one point, correct?
Excuse me. You mean Sarah Wei?
Yes.
I don't recall that.
Okay. How about the leader of the UK farm? He was a member of the Iron Blood Group.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you did more for the UK farm than just do streaming, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Kumraju said, actually, Your Honor, I am about to turn to a different subject. I just wanted to note the time and see if Your Honor wanted to continue.
The court said, well, if you're going to another subject, then this would be an appropriate time to stop, even though it's only 2:40 p.m.
Mr. Kamaraju said, I will take credit for the 5-minute break, Your Honor.
The court said, all righty. So, members of the jury, we will stop our work for today. You'll return tomorrow on time, as you did today, so that you'll be able to walk through this door at 9:30 a.m. Remember that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to have any discussions in your presence. Have a good evening.
Jury not present.
The court said, sir, you may step out. Don't discuss the testimony.
The witness said, yes, Your Honor. Witness not present.
The court said, and you may be seated. Is there anything that the parties want to raise before we continue tomorrow morning?
Ms. Murray said, may we have a brief sidebar, Your Honor?
The court said yes.
Ms. Murray said, thank you.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, I forgot to mention that the note that I received from alternate no.
Ms. Shrofa said, 5.
The court said, 5 yesterday, I made court exhibit number 1. It came in at 12:10 p.m., and I dated the exhibit Friday, May 23, 2024. What's the issue?
Ms. Murray said, yes, Your Honor.
The court said, fine with me.
Ms. Shrofa said, we have no objection.
Mr. Kamaraju said, yeah, that's fine, Your Honor.
The court said, anything further?
Ms. Murray said, we just asked to seal this part of sidebar.
The court said, and it is sealed.
Ms. Murray said, thank you.
Ms. Shrofa said, Your Honor, does the court want to do anything with juror number 5? I know when we broke before the weekend. The thought was to excuse him.
The court said, oh, you're talking about alternate number 5?
Ms. Shrofa said, yes, Your Honor.
The court said, oh, I don't recall our decision to excuse him. Am I not recalling it correctly?
Mr. Kamaraju said, that was at least my understanding. I thought Your Honor was, because I thought we had a discussion about how to excuse him without alerting the rest of the jury. Which is why we thought you had brought him back instead to not tip off the jury. We may have misunderstood. That was our understanding.
The court said, so is he even still here?
Ms. Shrofa said, he is here, Your Honor.
The court said, all right. I'll excuse him.
Ms. Shrofa said, thank you, Your Honor.
In open court.
The court said, just a reminder, counsel, I have proceedings after this matter, so you'll need to clear the tables.
Juror present.
The court said, you're alternate number 5. You may be seated.
Juror said, I am alternate 5.
The court said, in light of your scheduling issues, I am excusing you from jury service. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Juror said, thank you, Your Honor.
Juror not present.
The court said, anything further?
Mr. Finkel said, not from the government.
Mr. Kamaraju said, not from us, Your Honor.
The court said, thank you.
Adjourned to May 29, 2024 at 9 a.m.